Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 159. My name is NBZ and this is it. This is the last official Nintendo-y podcast from Nintendo Life, This Nintendo Life in 2019. We'll have another one. And we'll have another one after that, but this is the last official actual Nintendo podcast. I'm of course joined by Bally, who's been talking to me a lot in December, it seems, because there's been a lot to talk about.
It's been like hopping on the mics, editing, playing games, seeing films, watching things, beating, like it's loaded. It's fully loaded.
It's fully loaded, but we've enjoyed it. It's been a good time. And this is the big one. This is our grand Game of the Year Part 2 special. And it will be a decision about what the best Nintendo video games that came out in 2019. And it will be a lot of fun to talk about. Because we actually played a lot. And Bally was like, here's this list I made. And I was like, and you were like, oh, I think I missed 2 games. And I was like, actually, Bally, you missed 6 games. This and this and this and this. So we'll discuss that later in the show, of course. Bally, do you want to tell people what we are going to be talking about this show?
Sure thing. First segment, we're going to talk about the games we have been playing. Second segment, we're going to talk about your games of 2019. And then for the third segment, we're going to be doing our own top 10 list games of 2019. So that's a combined list, and it's going to be 10 games for the first time, partly because we've been playing so many games this year. I think the total is actually 24 we got to. So we're going to make that list 24 into a top 10, and we'll order that top 10, obviously.
Clearly. There are people out there who are like, here's my top 10, but it's alphabetical. And I'm like, you coward! You monster! We must rank all things and everything.
You'll rank it.
So, let's kick things off then. Both of us have been playing the latest and final entry in the Shovel Knight saga, King of Cards. So this expansion just came out at the start of December, and they also shipped it with Shovel Knight Showdown, which is like a Smash Brothers style fighting game type deal.
Without online multiplayer, to my knowledge.
Yeah, which neither of us have dipped into.
No.
I've not got to that yet. Shout out to Pop Agenda, who hooked us up with codes for the podcast. Thank you very much for that. Because we both owned them on... I owned Shovel Knight on 3DS, you owned it on Wii U, and before launch they were like, well, we don't know when these versions are coming out in Europe. And then it turned out they came out like a day later anyway, so we could have just played them on the original systems, but I think it was nice to finally play Shovel Knight on Switch, because I hadn't yet. And I will say that playing it on undocked, just handheld, looks really nice on the Switch screen. The pixel art has always been great, but it pops even better, which I was a big fan of.
Yeah, like we're totally used to that art style by now, but you need to remember like how impactful Shovel Knight's artwork and style was the first time round, and like you should, in my view, like you should still give its expansions like King of Cards the same credit, because it is just so crisp, so great. Like, and the character like King Knight has some really great animations like himself, like the pirouetting he's doing and this sort of thing.
So I tweeted this out, but there is an animation for when you are, so you know the dishes, the silver dishes which have meat under them that you heal yourself with. If you pirouette on top of that, it does this animation of him spinning the dish up in the air, and like it's so good, and the sound design's amazing, and it just looks awesome. And that kind of level of attention to detail and polish is one of the things for me that sets Shovel Knight apart as this indie game that, you know, sense could be a Nintendo product, right? Like it really has that level of care and attention to detail, and just refined to a razor sharp point. Which is excellent. So
yeah, totally.
So how have you felt about playing through this? You are probably, I would say, about 2/3 of the way through, probably closer to 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of optional stuff I've skipped on. I'm just kind of plowing on with it, and I am sort of in the third world, and because it's kind of like divided into these weird worlds, and like all the levels are much shorter. I'm finding it it's very nice to go back to that world, and I am actually finding it very difficult in comparison to the other games. Like, I think
the most different, right? Just in terms of the level design being deliberately shorter, having all these hidden exits, and kind of levels having multiple areas that you can completely miss out on that have really good platforming challenges in them, often much harder than the main level itself, and will lead you off on a different path, which will either take you to a hidden area with some gem stuff, or some place where you can bypass another level.
Get like a medal or something, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't necessitate that you do that. You can very much just get to the end without going through every single level, which is really interesting. But I think all the levels are so good and they're so well designed, and obviously you still have the theming from the original game, which is all the different types of knights have their own world. And there are things within those, but there's so many new mechanics that just get thrown in there and then thrown away again. It is again the sort of Mario Galaxy style of design, where it's just like, here's this thing, this is going to be in this one level, and we're going to throw it away afterwards. And that definitely happens a lot towards the end of the game as well, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. I think that just generally King Knight feels unique as well, where he is very much the DK or the warrior of this world, I guess.
100%, yeah.
He's got that shoulder charge. He's much slower. I don't think his jump feels as high or as fluid personally. And like,
I don't know. Well, the thing with me is because it's basically an air dash as well as a ground dash, he does have a bit better time maneuvering within the air. And then obviously you have the pirouette. So it's like, okay, so the way it works, for people who don't know, is that you can charge into a wall, and if you bash into the side of the wall, he then goes into this pirouette, which basically elevates his height, so he like gets pushed up and starts spinning around like a top in the air. And that can be used to bounce off multiple enemies in the air to give yourself momentum, but you can't dash again unless you've bounced on an enemy, right? So like you can run into a wall, pirouette, you can't dash out of the pirouette until you've landed on something to bounce off of it to kind of reset the dash essentially. So so that's a thing that I definitely got caught by quite a few times in terms of some of the levels, enemies will pop up and you're like, okay, I need to get across this gap, and you'll forget, oh no, I need to actually dash into this thing.
Like, I'm locked in and here I am falling to my death.
Exactly, right.
And I'm still doing that constantly, honestly, because
it takes time to get used to, for sure.
And the levels are really laid out where it's very much you need to dash here, jump on this thing, pirouette off that, and then you have another shoulder bash and you do that. And like if you break one part of that sequence, like you are more likely than not to fall to your death, especially like in the later levels. It's very specific what you need to do. And
I don't know why this is, but this has definitely come to the forefront of my mind more so than in any other playing of Shovel Knight so far. I just feel like falling to your death is such a punishment. Like, it's a real punishment.
Yeah, I'm feeling that a lot as well, because it's so sudden, or a spike, you know, like it's like boom, and
yes.
Maybe in some ways because they're shorter levels and there's only one or maximum like 2 checkpoints, it can also feel quite punishing. Like, we're going back a lot of screens because each screen is almost like a little bit Celeste-like in a way, where you have to clear the screen in a very specific way.
Sure,
and then when you die, you're going back a few more screens. So you're having to go through these screens doing deliberate platforming segments in a very scripted way. Oh, I hit that spike again, and then you go back. And it is that there's a lot of negative feedback with Shovel Knight, in the sense that if you die, you lose some money, and then you have to reach that money, otherwise you lose it again. So if you keep dying on a bit, you are gradually losing more and more money. And obviously the money...
if you're not picking it back up again, which is very easy to do when it's hovering over a pit.
I think even if you pick it up again and keep dying, to my knowledge, it is still going down a little bit slowly.
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that if you collect everything, then you stay at an even keel. You just kind of...
But also, and this is something they've not fixed in any of the games that was a criticism with the original, is that like when you die, say on a spike that's maybe low down, or you die down a pit, your floating bags of money will just appear above the pit, and sometimes it's impossible to even go down to that pit and get the money back. So you, generally speaking, you will lose money because at some point you're not going to catch them back up again, essentially. I mean,
yes.
And that is quite a negative feedback loop, in the sense that there's some really powerful stuff you can buy with your money, like in this game, whether that's heart containers or using your mana points or whatever they're called. I can't remember what they're called.
That's not money. That's medals, I think, to get that boosted. But you can do the thing where you buy different sets of armor. The set of armor that I bought straight away and then didn't unequip was the one where if you fall in a pit, it just does a bunch of damage, but you just get bonked back up out of it, and like there's a rat that flies you out.
Oh wow! Okay, I want that bad.
Yeah, you should have access to it at this point in the game. I got it like maybe midway through the second world.
I think I just had spent my money and couldn't afford it at the time.
Okay.
And because I've been dying quite a lot, like I have been feeling like my money is quite
yeah.
limited, especially compared to the other games.
I don't know. By the end of the game, I had way too much money, was the thing I found. And maybe that's because I was doing the levels multiple times in order to get the secret exits. But I had like 25,000 gold by the end and didn't have anything to spend it on. So,
and it's weird because the bosses themselves I'm finding are much easier, and I think that's for one very simple reason, is that for some reason this game they've just decided all the bosses are going to constantly drop hearts when you do damage to them.
Yes, as long as you get them within a sequence of like 3 or 4 hits in a row, they'll just pop them out pretty easily.
And that feels very out of kilter with what Shovel Knight was before, and also kind of its inspirations like Mega Man. Like imagine Mega Man bosses dropping loads of health the more damage you do. To my knowledge, that's just not a thing. And so they feel really easy in my view in comparison to a lot of the platforming. The platforming combined with enemies on platforms, and then you get the Castlevania knockback into the pits. Like that's where I think this game is at its absolute toughest. And
I mean the thing that helps with that is that generally if you get knocked away, you can dash, and then even if you dash into a wall, you pirouette back up. So it feels like there is a bit more leeway.
It doesn't always feel the cleanest to me. It feels quite not mashy, but a bit
messy, right?
Yeah,
like it does. Messy. It doesn't feel as streamlined as it could potentially be in that sense. But generally, I do like a lot of the heirlooms and the things that they've added to make it a little bit easier for yourself. So, for instance, one of them is I can't remember if this is like an armor upgrade or if it's an heirloom. I think it's just an armor upgrade. That there's the mechanic on the ship, the bird mechanic, and she like adds things to your armor. So one of them is when you land on the ground after pirouetting, you just burst out little bits of air or whatever that shoot along the ground and hit enemies. One of those is a Hollow Knight style hold the down button and you will start to heal yourself. Like King Knight will sit there and start crying and hearts will appear above him and they'll kind of slowly like go into him. And finding the window in a boss fight sometimes to do that, especially near the end of the game where the boss fights actually do ramp up a little bit, is pretty crucial, because otherwise you don't have a way of healing outside of the the hearts that get dropped. So,
and is there any? Is that using like your aura, your mana, or is that just using your money?
I think that's just one inherent ability that you get to use once per life, essentially. So as long as you've not died, then so basically you use it, and then if you die, then you get it reset again.
Sure. Okay.
So it's just like a part of the armor set that you unlock with money that you can buy on the ship. And I think it's interesting, right? Because for me, in terms of storytelling and like characters and stuff, Shovel Knight's always been very kind of, fun and jovial, and like there's good writing in there. It's pretty incisive and generally is humorous and doesn't really cut too deep. But I did think Spectre Knight was a different kind of level, right? I thought Spectre Knight was they kind of added a layer
prequel,
to it.
Like it's a proper build up.
And it is a bit more serious than the other stories, and I think they probably do the better job with, there are like character flashback scenes that you play through and stuff like that. I think it was really well done. King Knight is kind of just a big jolly adventure that's very hammy, and you kind of get that sense as soon as you start, because you go home and your mother's like, "Oh, King Knight, you're a very, very silly young boy," and he's like, "No, mother, I won't listen to you," and it's very much like he's a brat. He is basically just a giant brat.
Yeah, to my knowledge, King Knight won some sort of poll amongst fans about what game they were going to make an expansion of.
No. Bally, we've been talking about this since Shovel Knight came out. All of these campaigns were stretch gold from the Kickstarter. The reason we have a King Knight campaign is because it wasn't one of the stretch goals in the Kickstarter.
I'm sure I read that there was a poll for the last bit of it, the last expansion. I know the others were stretch goals. I know that, but I mean, I thought that King Knight won out of a poll amongst other knights.
I don't know what the Kickstarter situation was, if they did a poll through the Kickstarter, but it was very much since the beginning. They were like, okay, we're going to do it. This character's playable, and this character's playable, and they did it for 3 characters, which is why they've been making fucking Shovel Knight for 6 years, right? Like that is the ultimate.
Shovel Knight is so perfectly in line with the history of this podcast. Like,
it is 100% is, yes. It's usually around the end of the year as well that we get here's another Shovel Knight expansion and play through the game again. And I think maybe after Spectre Knight, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of done now. And that was 2 years ago? I think it might have been 2017.
Yeah, there was a long enough break because Spectre Knight felt like it came quite quickly after Plague Knight.
Sure.
I don't think it actually was. I think that's just in my mind. But
maybe.
Then it felt like this was a much longer break, and so I was totally ready for more Shovel Knight when this came about.
Yes, 100%. And I also think it is the most distinct in terms of gameplay from the structural standpoint, right? Just having those shorter levels makes it feel more digestible to some degree, right? Because you only have one checkpoint per level, and each level can kind of get in and out, and it's not like having a boss at the end of each level, because now you have these rings that you cling to that will take you back to your ship or whatever, and it does feel it feels more in line with, say, a Mario 3, which is what it's cribbing in terms of its map design. Its map and world overlay is very much now even more Mario 3 because you have multiple worlds that you're going to. And so it's not just cribbing the perspective, it's now cribbing a bit more of the actual design ethos of that game.
Yeah.
Thankfully, this game plays, in my opinion, much better than Mario 3 does, but again, that's the opinion of this podcast. I think that Shovel Knight generally has felt like it's maybe lent a bit too much on some of these ideas and just keeping reusing them. But quite frankly, I felt like this game has been so fresh. There have been so many moments where I'm like, either I don't remember it, or it just is something completely new. And you can really tell that despite the fact that, yes, they are kind of going through the same stuff again, it's so much more specifically designed and distinct from their previous stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to the game design. And when you think back to Shovel Knight and you think, right, what mechanics does Shovel Knight himself have? And it is the sideways shovel attack, or it's the downward, Scrooge McDuck spike.
Yeah.
And when you think about how those levels are designed for Shovel Knight, it's right, well, you have to spike across those points. And then you think, right, so when they put in Plague Knight and he's got all these different mechanics, all of a sudden all that level design that was designed for Shovel Knight doesn't work. So they have to reinvent the wheel almost every single time because they've got these 4 characters. So it is a real testament to how well designed these games are, because they make the traversal so different between the 4 characters that the levels just have to be completely different. And obviously the theming is repeated a lot, but otherwise, mechanically, the levels end up feeling completely fresh, as you say, because it is so intrinsic to the way those characters act.
Yeah, and I do like a lot of the little things they've added to King Knight, right? Because his shoulder bash into the wall doesn't necessarily work all the time. There are some surfaces that he won't be able to get a pirouette off of. And so you are sometimes in situations almost like puzzle design where you're trying to figure out how to get up to a thing, and it might be a secret, it might be a hidden chest, or even it might be one of those little deposits in the ground that he spins into, and it was the thing with Shovel Knight where he would just dig the kind of coal out of the ground or the little pile, but this time King Knight just drills himself into it essentially, which so satisfying when you do that. I really,
and then
really
that, even him drilling through a thing becomes a mechanic where drilling down through the platform you're on becomes a way of, it's a negative, I didn't mean to drill down, so it becomes how do I get from this platform to that platform without pirouetting into these dirt piles that will send me back to the start.
Because there are some which just drop you into lava actually in that level in particular.
Exactly. And it's just cool stuff like that where it's why don't we make it a punishment to find the dirt?
Yeah, and then it becomes, it's very much the issue of, well, this pirouette used to be this thing that was really helpful, and now I need to make sure I don't pirouette because otherwise I'm going to lose a life or whatever.
Yeah.
Even though there's no lives in Shovel Knight. One of the good things about Shovel Knight, it is learned from game design, and there's no lives, and it realizes that it's stupid, which is good. There's also obviously this aspect to the game that is an added extra that I don't think either of us are that interested in. It's a card game, right? King of Cards. I guess the whole premise of the story is like King Knight wants to win the tournament and become the King of Cards, and so it's. This is my problem with it, is it's painted as a card game, but really it's like one of those slidey puzzle things that I don't like playing at all. And it's a little, it's not overly complex, but it's not really my thing at all. And I played like, say, 3 or 4 matches just to get a sense of it, just to get an idea of like, how does this work? How does this play? But, I've never been someone who plays card games within a game. Like Gwent in The Witcher 3 didn't touch at all. I just wasn't interested. I'm that game for me I'm far more interested in actually playing that game. And it's the same thing with Shovel Knight. It's like I want to do the platforming. I don't want to spend my time with this. And this game is long. Like holy shit, it's long. It took me 7.5 hours, and a lot of that was because I did go and do pretty much every optional extra. It's interesting because a lot of the bosses from the original Shovel Knight aren't actually in levels. They just wander around the overworld and you run into them.
Yeah, I noticed that after a while. I was like, oh, there's Plague Knight. I'm going to go see what I'm fighting him, right? Okay. And then it wasn't like at the end of a level at all.
Exactly, yeah.
On Joustus, is that Joustus?
Joust, like jousting.
Those little, so there's like a Joustus hub almost in each world. Those little hub worlds, I like the character that they add. Like, it is a nice little cool place to be, but they feel identical to the sort of, not gym leaders, but like there's the equivalent of gym leaders in the Pokemon trading card game, Game Boy game. And the point of these gym leaders is you go up to them and they say, oh, you have to beat everyone in my little area at cards before you can face me. And that's what these little Joustus arenas almost are like. You have to beat everyone else before you can sort of take on the champion. And I like that as much as like I agree with you. The game didn't do anything for me. I was prepared to get involved in quite a cool little card game, but then as you say, it's not really a card game, it's just tile pushing, and it just didn't resonate with me at all. So I literally did about 2 or 3, as you said, and just kind of moved on. But if you actually played all the Joustus games, get all those medals and do all the extra levels, like this game could go on like 10-12 hours. Like it's
easily.
Really long game if you actually do all the extra stuff. But again, like if you want to just mainline it like I'm kind of doing, and I'm only about maybe 4 hours in, 3.5 or something, so you can beat the whole game kind of fairly quick if you choose to mainline it. And as you say, like there's so many levels and so many routes to get from, essentially you're just trying to get from the left side of the map to the right side of the map, and there's so many different routes you can do that with secret exits and different other secrets that there's a lot of flexibility that there just really wasn't in the same way in previous Shovel Knight games.
Yeah, it's definitely less linear, and it's interesting because they split the levels up. Instead of having one snow level, you now have 2 snow levels, and like they can both be independent of each other, and one of them can have the ice skating thing, one of them can have this other mechanic, and then you can combine it almost at the end. And it means that I was jumping from, like, I did the first snow level, then I was like, I'm going to go up to the top of the map and do one of the propeller levels. And I'm like, I'll go to the middle of the map and do, like, one of the haunted levels or whatever. So you can jump around with theme even more so than you could before. And it does make it just gives you a bit more choice, which in the end, I ended up doing everything anyway. So it didn't really matter that much. But yeah, I don't know. I was enjoying the game so much, I was enjoying the mechanics so much that for the first time, really, and I think this is mainly because the levels are a lot shorter than the original Shovel Knight, or all the campaigns, essentially, I just did all the secret exits. And, like, we talk about constantly on this show how we don't like that at all. Like, that's not one of the things we do. Even you, evangelist of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, have not gone back and done all of those secret exits and didn't in your first playthrough because it feels a bit time wasty, right? It feels like, okay, I'm going to play through the entire same level again. But the way that King of Cards is designed is that generally to get to the secret exit, you only have to play through a couple of screens before there is a secret path that splits off and is a completely separate area. So you're not really wasting that much time when you're going back through, because the majority of the level is completely different when you're going for the secret exit. So that's something I appreciate quite a bit, is that because of the tightness of it, because of it's being pared down, it makes me more willing to go after that stuff. And those challenges are much more difficult than the regular levels are. Like, they add even more ridiculous platforming and enemies and things like that. And I found it very rewarding to go through, despite the fact that, yes, there will be times where you're like, well, fuck this level design, what are you doing to me, game? It definitely works. And also, one of the other things that we haven't really talked about, but was the case in the original as well, and all the campaigns, is after you die, you don't have to recollect things. So if you have gotten a medal, or if you have gotten all the money, that stays collected, which actually, yes, it's frustrating to go on a corpse run and go back and collect your money, but it is so much faster after you have died because you've already collected everything, right? So you're not spending the time to go over to that secret corner to get the medal that you spent a couple of minutes getting. So it's constantly, you're cutting down on that, which means that, yes, you have to go back through the same area, but it's way, way faster every time you do it. And you also know the area better, so you can kind of, not necessarily speed run, but you can get through it faster.
I really noticed with this game more than other Shovel Knight games, when you're going through a level for the first time, and you're kind of working out, right, that enemy does this, and then I need to platform like that, and then you die, and you're like, right, well, I know what I'm doing now. So going through the level again a second time feels so much faster, because it's not, puzzle platform was the wrong word, but there are puzzle elements in the sense of the methodology behind what the platforming you're doing.
Totally,
it's not just a case of executing on a skill. The larger part is often actually working out how to use that skill, which is a way that I would argue is very different from Celeste is maybe a bad example, because that does have puzzle elements as well, but the execution is much harder in Celeste, I would argue, than this game, where the execution is quite easy, but the puzzle is maybe the trickier part.
Yeah, and you can also refine it. Like, the moveset, I think, is very momentum-based, to the degree where, you run into something, you're pirouetting, and then dashing again. There is a lot of momentum built into the way that King Knight is designed, so you can often feel like you are just sprinting past things. And
I love the fact that he is pirouetting, and then for the ice level, they just turn that animation into a skating animation.
Yes.
It's stuff like that is just really zany, really fun.
Yeah, it's really good. It's ultimately, I'm very glad that Yacht Club are done with Shovel Knight now. Not that I think Shovel Knight's bad, far from it. I think we are both in agreement. It's one of the best independent things that has happened in the last decade. In many ways, Shovel Knight defines the last decade for independent games. But they definitely made a lot of promises on their Kickstarter, and now they're all done. And I'm kind of glad that we get to move on now. It's interesting. They put up a tweet talking about how, in this year, this many people would have got a free game, and this year, this many people. And then it was I think at this point, there are 2.5 million players of Shovel Knight. So I think over time, it's really built up this audience, and now there are so many people who just are getting this for free because they already bought Shovel Knight.
And I do think, from a critical perspective, critics are unfortunately talking about it less and less as each one comes out. It feels like the hype level is gradually
it's
down.
Because it's kind of games as a service, right? It's an expansion, it's an update. It's not shiny and new like it was in 2014, right? That's when it was ta-da, here's this brand new thing, and it really hit the ground running. But that's the case with lots of things, right? Destiny 2 Shadowkeep came out this year. The only people talking about that are people who care about Destiny 2. And it's not going to make waves aside from the people who are already invested in that ecosystem. It's very rare for that to happen, because the games industry generally is new shiny thing, let me talk about this, instead of update to old thing. But hey,
and that trend in itself has probably gotten worse since 2014. As an aside, you could even argue, the speed at which we're playing games and the critical media talk about one game before moving on to another game feels like it's getting shorter.
Well, the thing is that there's too many games, right? Everyone's just drowning in games, and so that's just the way it is now. We live in a constant state of video games, always coming out, always happening, and it doesn't help with stuff like Game Pass, where it's like, hey, here's another 17 free things. Okay, I need to stop saying free because I'm paying for this service. It's not free. It's like the free, like everyone talks about PS Plus games. It's like, well, the free games for the month. It's like, no, they're not free games. You pay for this service every year. Anyway, yes, I think to conclude probably on Shovel Knight, hey, Yacht Club, well done. Round of applause for Yacht Club. They've done a stellar job, and I think King of Cards is, I think it's probably the most similar in terms of mechanics, moveset wise, to the original Shovel Knight, and it's kind of a nice way to round it out because it has a uniqueness to it, it has a different structure to it, but it is a bit more familiar in terms of how it plays.
Yeah, like the movement of Spectre Knight and especially Plague Knight, I would argue, like felt
Plague Knight is fucking
different.
wild. Like Plague Knight is such a different
Plague Knight's
game.
like, let's jump and shoot downwards in a 45-degree kind of.
And it was like all about creating combinations of potions,
that's maybe my highlight out of the 4 games. I don't know. I've not finished this one yet, but
that is crazy because that is like the most not universal opinion at all.
Really,
like, most
people
do not like Plague Knight at all. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. No, I think it might be. Anyway, I need to have a think about that.
Cool. Great. Well, Shovel Knight. That was the thing. You, Bally, I didn't. You say you're still playing Fire Emblem, but I never believe you.
I mean, Fire Emblem is the ongoing saga that I just. It's an uphill battle. It's a mental hurdle to play in my mind, and I'll try and beat that at the start of next year, I think. But first, I'll try and finish up King Knight.
Cool. So there has been one more thing that I played through. And it's pretty interesting because there are a few gaming blind spots I have, mainly on the Microsoft side of things, right? Earlier this year, I played through Gears of War 5, and that was a very surprising thing to me. I did not expect to like that game as much as I did, but I was like, oh, geez, this is actually very good. And the other Microsoft series that I have no affiliation with or not much history with is Halo, right? Halo is one of the biggest names in games. I've played some Halo before, and I think you have as well in terms of multiplayer.
I just sort of played multiplayer, back at university. I had a good time with it, actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it is from a certain era, right? A certain time period. There's no zooming down sights. It is very much like that old school.
GoldenEye.
Yeah, it is GoldenEye. Yeah, almost. It's building off that, right? Well, GoldenEye, a lot of people say is like the origin of first-person shooters on console, but Halo is the one that came around and was like, okay, we're going to make this cool and accessible now.
Does Half-Life on PC just kind of something completely separate, do you think? Or like...
Oh, totally, yeah. Like Halo is like consoleizing the shooter because the shooter was a thing on PC, right? You have Wolfenstein through Doom, through Half-Life, right? There's a clear lineage and evolution of first-person
But you're not like using analog sticks, are you?
Exactly, it's mouse and keyboard, and I mean, original Doom didn't use the mouse at all. It was just pure keyboard, which is very interesting because you couldn't differentiate between height, and so when you were shooting demons, like it would almost auto-target, but you would have to have them kind of in the middle of the screen where your gun was pointed. But if they were higher up than you, it would still hit them, which is very weird, like just the way it was designed and everything. But talking about Halo, the Master Chief Collection is now on PC, by which I mean they are slowly rolling out every game in the Master Chief Collection on PC. They're also putting them out on Steam for like 10 quid. And so this is the first time, really, that I've had the opportunity to play a Halo game. So Halo Reach is the first one that they've put out. And Halo Reach was the last game, I believe, that Bungie made in the series. So Bungie, the original developers of Halo, obviously they now make Destiny. And I played Destiny 2 earlier this year, a game which I didn't talk about on the show and which I didn't think is really worthy of talking about in any way, aside from the fact that it has probably the best shooting that I felt in video games in terms of using a controller. The games are very much built around controller. I tried to start playing Halo Reach with mouse and keyboard, and I was like, no, this is a Bungie game. It is so controller-based that it's not even funny, and a lot of it was to do with the screen not tearing, but like it felt weird when I was moving my mouse around quickly because the world wasn't really intended to have that happen.
Wasn't like rendering in time. Just wasn't it felt
no,
sticky?
it was rendering. It just felt a bit weird. I don't know. There was something I couldn't quite put my finger on about it that it didn't feel right to me. So that's why I just switched over straight away to the controller. It's weird because we're almost on the Xbox Series X now, and I'm still here using a fucking 360 controller on my PC. But the 360 controller is good, man. It's still really good. I'll probably upgrade it when the Series X comes out and like get one of those because the D-pad on that seems a lot better and stuff like that. So I'll eventually, because I went the whole Xbox. I was gonna get an Xbox One controller to use on PC, but I just never ended up doing so. Anyway, Halo. It's weird because this game holds up so well mechanically, and I didn't expect that. I certainly have gone into games like this, shooters on PC, with a mindset of like, okay, I'm doing this for historical curiosity, less so than enjoyment. And the case with Half-Life was I kind of got the historical curiosity of it about an hour and a half in and realized, dear God, I'm feeling so motion sick I can't do this to myself.
I'd forgotten you tried Half-Life.
Yes, I attempted to play Half-Life and then failed because I was just going to vomit all over the shop. So that was unfortunate. I think a lot of games these days have gotten much better about, first-person movement and having it be accessible to a wider group of people. And Halo worked for me because I was able to change the field of view. Field of view is often the thing that gives me real bad motion sickness because on consoles, a lot of it is designed to be quite narrow because they expect you to be far back from the television. Whereas when you're playing on a monitor, you're so close to the screen that for someone with motion sickness, if it is such a narrow point of view, it messes with your brain and really screws things up. So I know exactly what FOV I need in order for me to not be sick. If you're curious, it's 103, and I learned that from playing Overwatch. My Overwatch FOV is set to 103, which I'm perfect with, and Overwatch has never made me sick. It is very, very fluid and excellent, which is why any time a new game pops up and I'm like, I don't know what FOV to do, I just put it to 103, and usually I'm fine. So that was what I played with, and man, this game is a lot of fun. Halo Reach is really well designed in terms of its really open spaces. This universe is very, I wouldn't say generic, but like it's sci-fi, right? And it's, for me, sci-fi has never hit in the same way as fantasy has, and we've kind of discussed this on the show. And there are a lot of Star Warsy feeling elements to it, like big kind of open planets, like weird aliens, like laser guns. It's got the generic sci-fi tropes you would want. It's
always seemed a bit more militaristic than a lot of other sci-fi. Yeah.
Totally, and this story in particular is very militaristic, right? So you're kind of an unnamed soldier who is part of this strike team on the planet Reach, and Reach is being assaulted by, I think they're called the Covenant. So there's this like alien race who are attacking, and they're trying to take over the universe, blah blah blah. Which is, I guess, it's setting up Halo 1, right? Because this is a prequel to the Halo series, so you're not playing
the fourth
as
game to come out, or
I don't know, because there was ODST, and I don't know what ODST was, but this was the last Bungie one. So,
okay.
But yeah, so essentially it is a prequel.
You wanted to go to that one first before going to like Halo 1.
Well, I didn't, but this is the way they're rolling them out on PC. This is the only one available on the Master Chief Collection right now. They're basically doing it chronologically, so they're putting them out in timeline order, which is interesting because a lot of the times with stuff like that, Star Wars and whatever.
You got to start with Phantom Menace, come on.
Well, no, I think the thing is that most people will come to series like that and they'll start with, okay, what was the first one that came out, and then go from there.
Yeah.
It's not often.
I'm a sucker for. I like doing it in the vision of how it's like chronological. I would always go with episode 1 first,
chronological. Yeah, even though like chronological is very retconny in senses and can hand wave things, but it very much is a prequel. And I was talking to you about this, but my God, this feels like Rogue One. And it's kind of the group of characters that you kind of care about, but not really. And like a lot of them end up dying. And like the ending is basically just the ending of Rogue One. Because they are inconsequential as characters, but they have a mission to do, which is very consequential, right? Because there's a thing that happens later in the game. I'm like, oh, this is the thing. Oh, this is the origin of that. And then that's going to lead into the first Halo. I get it now. There's a very consequential event that happens that actually I understood as the little Halo knowledge I have, which was pretty cool. And I was like, okay, so this is the setup for what happens in the next game. And that is their mission. Like, they're on their mission to do that, and then they do that, and then like It's Rogue One. You know what happens at the end of Rogue One. So but in terms of the game itself, right, the level design and the guns and all that stuff, it feels really open in so many ways, right? You approach situations and you have a bunch of different weapons at your disposal. There's a sniper rifle that feels really good, and you can like zoom in and like really get people down. There's some pretty good close range weapons, but a lot of this game is juggling enemies' weapons that they drop because there's limited ammo, and so you run out of it and you're like, oh god, I need to scramble for another weapon. It feels like, because this doesn't happen anymore in first-person shooters, right? I think 2016's Doom was one of the first games to bring that idea back of like ammo conservation and like being tactical about what you're using.
I was going to ask, like, as much as I've gotten into like Apex Legends, a blind spot of mine is still like a single player first person shooter campaign, and like,
sure,
what does that look like? How is the level structured in terms of like ammo preservation? How do enemies approach you? Is it quite, are you going down a corridor, or is it always open?
So for me, I think that this entire game is designed from the idea of open spaces, far more so than your traditional Titanfall or Call of Duty campaign, where it's much more linear, hiding around corners and stuff like that. Because the environment is very flexible, like you could just hide behind a random rock.
There's a lot more like vehicles and stuff, right?
There's vehicles that you can just kill enemies who are on vehicles, then take the vehicle of the enemy and use it against them, which is so much fun. There are these very Star Wars-esque, like, almost episode 1 style gunships that are like mini kind of hovercrafts. They're kind of like the things that
they're
battle
the alien
droids,
ones, right?
Yeah, they're like purple.
I know what you mean.
Yes, so those ones you can hijack, and then they basically have infinite ammo. So it's actually a really good thing to get because you can just shoot as much as you want and not have to worry about that stuff. And it was very useful because there are some even bigger kind of, what are the episode 1 like ships that aren't ships that are on the ground when they get to the Gungan area, like the tanks, the tanks,
droid tanks,
right? So there are ships like tanks like that you can't really get into. You have to like straddle them and then like throw a grenade inside to blow them up. But for most of those, I would just like sidle around them on my purple hovercraft and just try and shoot them to death and just trying to, not die. Speaking of which, the checkpointing is excellent. Like, fantastic checkpointing. You die and you're like instantly back where you want to be. It's really well done in terms of like, there are very big waves of enemies at the end of the game and it checkpoints it perfectly. You're never worried about if you die because you're never sent back too far. Just really smart, like more PC design from that perspective, but PC games were much more about your own control over it, where you could save wherever you wanted, even if you're in a shit situation, which in some cases could put you in a really bad position. But I think Halo handles it very well. And so, like, a lot of it is just trying to take down all these enemies, but you're constantly switching weapons, you are trying to find vantage points, and you're constantly flipping between being on vehicles and just being on the ground. You can get different upgrades, so you have, like, a secondary ability, which is auto set to run, but then you can pick up in the level different variants on it. So you can pick up an ability that is armor, so you can just lock down your armor and make it back to full, or there's one which is a jetpack, so you can hover and but you lose your sprint essentially. So you keep rotating these abilities through. I tend to stick with the sprint for most of the game, but there were moments where it's like, okay, I've got the jetpack, so now I'm hovering above you and I can take you down from a bit of a vantage point. And so many of the spaces are just really well designed for multiple corridor spaces or areas that you can hide around. What's going on is just very, very crucially important. And the game is just really well built around it. And I think one of the problems with this release in particular, the Master Chief Collection, I don't know if you remember, back in the day when it first came out on Xbox, was derided because it was broken as fuck. Like, the multiplayer didn't work for all these games. There were audio issues, and I didn't know about those audio issues back then, because the thing that dominated conversation was everything is broken on the multiplayer. I can't play Halo 3 online with people. It's dire. It's a horrible situation. But what people talked about probably, but I didn't hear about, is the audio is really fucked up. So when I started playing, I was like, oh, this feels a bit crackly and weird, and like it is very much not what you expect from a polished product from Microsoft, right? Like when people are speaking to you over the voice comm or over the radio or whatever, or nearby you, the audio balancing is completely off. There's no subtitling for just active talk. There's subtitling within actual cutscenes, but when your people are around you, there's nothing signposting that, and it's all really crackly. It gets like, if it's too loud, it does that thing where it crackles too much. And I was like, oh, I guess it's just the time. I guess Halo Reach back in the day, they couldn't, this video games were different back then, blah blah blah. But apparently I went online and people were like, why is the audio so garbage in this game? This wasn't like this in the original. So this is a problem with the Master Chief Collection. And I was kind of unaware that it was a problem until I read about it, because I was like, oh, maybe it's just because it's an old game. Nope, turns out it's a problem. And like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it definitely takes away, I think, from the experience somewhat. So I would say if you're going to play this, probably wait until they patch that. I don't know how long that's going to take. But I think they eventually did it with a lot of the other games in the original Xbox release of the Master Chief Collection. So we'll see if that gets sorted. But otherwise, I think the story is serviceable. Like, I wasn't emotionally invested necessarily, but I do think that they do some really cool stuff. And I think I mentioned this on an episode we've done in December. I don't know which one, because we've done fucking 9,000 episodes. There is a moment in Halo Reach where you're just in a spaceship in space doing dogfighting, and it completely changes everything, and it's like, oh wow, I didn't realize this type of gameplay was in Halo. And obviously you're on vehicles a bunch. There are like turret sequences. There's a lot of variety. There's a huge amount of diversity in locations and in spaces and where you're going, and it's also a game which kind of lets you find your own way. It's weirdly open and yet linear. You can't really get lost in it, despite the fact that the world and the scope of Reach is so huge. Like,
is there always like a waypoint to go? Like, you need to go here?
No, there's not. There's no waypoints really. You kind of just find your own way. But even when I didn't have a map and didn't really know where I was going, I kind of just found my way naturally. And I think that speaks to how
design of the world or something.
Yeah, how well it's designed, that it just, my curiosity took me off in this direction that ended up being the correct way to go, which I think is a skill that is very undervalued, because you don't necessarily think about it when it's done well, but it's so obvious when it's done poorly, right? Like, it's so clear when there's an open space game that doesn't correctly signal where you're supposed to go, and you're just wandering around this area for like 10 minutes trying to figure out what's the exit, where am I supposed to go? It is so seamless in this game that I was really taken aback and very surprised. And yeah, I beat the whole campaign over a few days, and I loved playing it. Just the feel of the weapons is awesome. It has that Bungie kind of patented feel, which I don't know how to describe, but it's like a mixture of the sound design and like the satisfaction of the enemies going down, and like how many hits it takes to take them down. And there really is this kind of combat chess of like, you're jumping out of the way. There are certain enemies that are melee that will charge at you, and they have shields up, and so you're very balancing, like, okay, I need to take down the shield and then shoot them, trying to headshot them as much as possible. And it's just trying to manage enemies, because there's often like 10, 15 on screen at once, and so it's like, okay, take down these guys tactically first, throw a grenade over at those guys because they have shields, try and maybe take down this guy who's about to throw his grenade, so he drops it and then kills people, which is one of the things that happens in Uncharted quite often that I like, is like, you shoot a guy who's about to throw a grenade and he drops it and it blows up the guy next to him who he's standing next to. That kind of almost physicsy stuff that goes on is a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm very surprised at how good this game is in terms of its playability in 2019, and that's not the thing I generally expect from first-person shooters when I come to them. I expect, like, okay, we're going to do this thing with the narrative, like Half-Life was trying to push forward, or we're trying to do these things with a level design, but the actual gameplay feel, the moment-to-moment of moving and shooting and jumping and running, it feels great. It really is excellent, and I would highly recommend people check this game out. It's not necessarily made me a Halo fan, but like I'm in now. I will
keen to try the others.
I will
now,
play
though.
all these Halo games now 100% if they all feel as good as this one. And granted, this is the most refined one probably because it's the last one Bungie worked on. They had a lot of time to figure things out and make it work. So going back to Halo 1 now is probably going to be maybe a bit more of a shock to the system because Reach was a 360 game, whereas Halo 1 was an original Xbox game. And I know that the version they put on the Master Chief Collection was a remastered version, so it will probably have a lot of refinements to it, hopefully, that they've added in. But yeah, I want to play as Master Chief now. I've played as this other dude, and that was fun. And oh man, there's a level later on in the game that I was like, wow, this is blowing my mind about the scale of it and what they're trying to do with it in terms of, like, you're in this aircraft and there's this like huge city and you're like going from building to building, like skyscrapers, and like flying across this entire open space, and like you're dropping into areas and they're like fully open areas. Like, man, very surprised by how well they achieve scale, and it's very impressive. So yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm in now. I'm on board with the Halo.
Nice.
I've ticked a thing off my list. So go me. Well done. Good job. Cool. Well, that's going to close us out for the What We Have Been Playing segment of the show. Don't go anywhere, however, because we'll be back after this break with some of your games of the year. See you in a sec.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It is our Game of the Year special, and that means that this second segment is going to be your games of 2019. So these are games that came out this year, that you also played this year. MBZ, would you like to take us away with the first email?
I would love to, Bally, but it would be really good if you told people the email they could send
the
these lovely emails to.
They've already sent them in. The email address is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And I should say, the first episode of 2020 is going to be our January special. It's our prediction special for the start of the year. So send us in your predictions, preferably Nintendo focused, but happy to take a few that aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, the first email with some games of the year is from Jess from Cape Cod, who writes, "Hi, Bally and MBZ. I love the show and have been a fan for well over a year now. I felt like 2019 was a great year for my kind of Switch games. As someone who's not a fan of Mario, Zelda, platformers, Metroidvanias, or puzzle games..."
What are you listening to this show for?
Yeah, why are you listening to us? I've been waiting very patiently for some of my preferred genres to get representation on Switch. I love RPGs and life farming sim games. That being said, here's my personal game of the year list, Nintendo only. Number 5, Pokemon Sword. While not my favourite entry in the Pokemon series, seeing one of my favourite game series looking the best it ever has on the Switch was a treat, not to mention all the quality of life changes and fantastic new Pokemon. Number 4, Gleaner Heights. This little indie game has really gone under the radar. It's on the Switch eShop and basically Stardew Valley with some subtle dark undertones. The residents deal with alcoholism, drug abuse, spousal rape and abuse, debt, illness, you name it. You unravel the horrors going on behind closed doors in town and can influence events as you see fit. all while happily brushing your cows, hunting wild animals for meat, planting turnips, and fishing by a scenic waterfall, plus much more. Number 3, Dragon Quest XI S. What more can be said? Phenomenal game with incredible enhancements on Switch. This is how ports of big games should be done for Switch. Number 2, Overwatch for Switch. While performance is not ideal, being able to play Overwatch on the go has been a dream for me ever since launch. It's the first and only FPS, much less a multiplayer one, that I have enjoyed. And number 1, Fire Emblem Three Houses. The story, world-building, narrative, and campaign in this game is just sublime. It got me through a shitty summer when my previous relationship was in its death throes, and I was miserable more often than not. Thanks, guys. Happy holidays, and here's to another year of Nintendo. Very good. I like that list. Gleena Heights. I think I saw her tweeting about this on Twitter, and I was like, "This looks interesting." Stardew-esque. I'm always up for a Stardew-esque game.
I remember the name, but I just don't remember that game. But
yeah, that's pretty cool.
There was that other game that was a bit Stardew Valley like. I remember watching a Giant Bomb quick look. Doraemon.
Yes, Doraemon. Oh, that looks really good. Yes,
it's really
absolutely.
good. Yeah, so another Stardew Valley like game.
I'm all about that stuff. Good stuff.
Right.
Great.
Our next list is from Jackpot, who's from Discord. He's from Vancouver, British Columbia. His number 5 is Mario Maker 2. His number 4 is SteamWorld Quest, Hand of Gilgamesh. Number 3 is Pokemon Shield. Number 2 is Telltale's Walking Dead, the final season. Yes, the first 2 episodes were in 2018, but let me cheat a bit, okay? And number 1, again, Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Seeing a bit of a trend here.
Bit of a trend.
Yeah. Interesting, because the Game Awards had the fan vote of like, hey, what if your game of the year, and the thing that won was Fire Emblem Three Houses. I say it again, how that didn't get nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards, I don't know.
Really weird. Weird.
I downloaded Telltale's final season Walking Dead thing on Epic because it was like £5 in one of their sales earlier this year, and I still have not played it, despite having been a big fan of the Walking Dead series. I played seasons 1 and 2, and then season 3 I was like, I can probably skip that because everyone said it was skippable. And so I'll get to that final season probably next year. Interested to see how they wrap it up and finish it out. Our next email is from B King from Sweden, and he has at number 5 Spyro Reignited Trilogy, number 4 Motorsport Manager, number 3 Luigi's Mansion 3. And then for the top 2, we have Untitled Goose Game. The most surprising game I've played this year is undoubtedly Untitled Goose Game. At first, I wasn't at all interested in picking it up. The reason I even managed to purchase it was because my girlfriend had seen the game on a YouTube channel called Girlfriend Reviews. Just FYI, Girlfriend Reviews, great fucking channel. Probably one of the best YouTube channels to come out. It was like end of 2018, but they like had
they did a big Red Dead 2 one, right?
Yes, that was the end of 2018, and then 2019 is like their first full year. I think it's a really good channel. I enjoyed their videos a lot. And so she wanted to pick it up herself when she was homesick. We ended up playing it together, which resulted in us having the best and funniest game session together this year. The game is very charming, and we really had to think strategically and creatively with the limited tools at hand to check all the boxes on the to-do list, barring a few inconveniences in the control department, which definitely made the time challenges that are unlocked at the end of the game difficult. We had a brilliant time just trying to annoy the villagers as much as possible. And number 1, Pokemon Sword. Although this game came out pretty late in the year, I'm quite sure I still put the most hours into it. It is a big step up from the last few games in the series from a number of aspects. I totally agree with you guys that the designs are much better than the last gen's Alola Pokemon. Even the new Galar forms I prefer over the Alola forms, which in itself were the highlights of Gen 7. The wild area, although being pretty barren, is a step in the right direction. I'm not looking for a totally open world style Pokemon game, but an open space like the wild area is a nice middle ground in my opinion. The best parts about the game, apart from the new Pokemon, are the quality of life improvements, no more random encounters, no more heart scale farming, to remember moves, the PC box being available all the time, autosave, the ability to rent teams, the list goes on. Obviously there are still a bunch of things that can be criticised, like the stuttering, lack of new animations, poor tree textures and whatnot, but the step up from Ultra Sun and Moon is really good to see. And considering the difference between the first and last games on 3DS, the next game can only get better from here.
I played Untitled Goose Game with Caroline with me, and I must say that game really does work with like someone beside you, just because it's really funny to like both laugh at, but also just someone like, oh, have you tried moving that MacGuffin to over there? And it kind of it's a really fun game for that, because it's both laugh out loud and a bit of a puzzle game at the same time.
Absolutely. I want to get to it next year. It's one of those games that's like, it's going to be on Game Pass on PC.
Oh, definitely.
They already put it on Game Pass on Xbox, so it's hopefully will come over to PC as well. Cool.
So our next list is from Simon, who's from the Netherlands.
This is my favourite email of the year every year.
Simon is he always sends in his list, and it's always worth hearing. So let's go for this one. Dear guys at This Nintendo Life, here's my top 10 list of video games for 2019. Number 10, Arcade Archives. Here we go, right? Yar Kung Fu, a release of an 80s fighting game. At number 9, Ring Fit Adventure. It gets you moving, but it's no Wii Fit. Number 8, The Ninja Saviors, Return of the Warriors. Don't know what that is.
No.
Number 7, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, a very average Zelda game. Don't remember that part of the title. Number 6, Castlevania Collection. Number 5, The Tourist. Number 4, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. Number 3, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, lovely soundtrack. Number 2, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. And then we said number 1, it's got to be number 1. Team Sonic Racing. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Greetings, Simon S. from the Netherlands.
You never get a list like Simon's. It's just every year he just comes out here swinging with this list. I love it. It's the best list. Man, The Tourist, that's a game I want to play.
Yeah, that looks like a cool game. Came at a really bad time, but we really should play that game.
Definitely. Shinen do good work. Obviously, they did the Fast series, Fast RMX.
Played Fast Racing on Wii U. It's a cool
We
game.
both did, yeah. Both got that at the end of that year. It was a lot of fun. But The Tourist looks like a completely different thing, and I like the look of it. It's got such a striking visual aesthetic. So want to get on
and for that visual aesthetic to run so well on Switch, I think, is also very impressive.
Yeah, for sure. I also would love to get to Crash Team Racing at some point. That seems like, as people who don't own Mario Kart on Switch, I should probably own a kart racer, and Crash Team Racing seems like the next best thing. So we'll probably look at that.
And I do hear good things about Team Sonic Racing as well. Like
yeah, I don't think it's as good as the previous Sonic Racing games, but
all right. How many have there been?
A couple, I think. There was Sonic Racing, there was Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed.
I mean, I don't know anyone who's talked about it other than like Vinny from Dragon
Yeah,
Ball.
Exactly, because he has like 900 hours with his kids in Sonic Racing. Jesus. Yes. Anyway, I just wanted to point out also, I checked what Simon sent us last year, and his number 5 last year was Devil's Third. So I think we're in maybe in a better place this year, but still fun. Thank you, Simon, as always. Then we have Chris from the internet who says, hey guys, time for my annual email, my favourite games of the year. So Fire Emblem Three Houses is by far and away the most invested I've been in a Fire Emblem game since the GBA Classics. I beat the Golden Deer Path shortly after launch, but couldn't stop thinking about it, and so I'm now over a little halfway through my Blue Lions run, still loving every moment. Mario Maker 2 is a game I still play on a daily basis, researching wacky contraptions and then thinking of ways to include them in my own levels that kept me coming back again and again. Unfortunately, the game doesn't lend itself to having lots of people play your levels, but the feeling of someone playing and liking your level is fantastic. The task of beating previously uncleared expert levels adds another layer and is incredibly rewarding. My aim for next year is to play more than just the Nintendo first-party games, since I would like to provide a list that's a little less obvious. I just downloaded Golf Story, having heard all the praise it regularly receives, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. Also, NBZ, Halo the Master Chief Collection is now on PC. You will find parts of it clunky compared with other shooters you've played, like Titanfall, Overwatch, but if you want a no-nonsense shooter that doesn't bog you down with superfluous hooks that don't really make sense, look no further. Plus, history element and how it's one of the most significant set of shooters in the genre. Please play these games. Well, I think Chris will be happy with the first segment of this show in that case, because yes, I did. I played Halo Reach. It was very good. Thanks again for the great podcast, in particular for NBZ's latest Top 100 Games YouTube series. Still listen to your podcast on a weekly basis after all these years. You're clearly onto a winner. Cheers, Chris. Thank you very much, Chris, and hopefully more people will hear my top 100 list, because that's going out in a couple of days' time from this podcast, so that'll be cool.
Nice. Our next list is from Devon, who's a friend of the show. He's from Emblemcast. Definitely worth checking that one out.
And I have plans in the future for him to come on and to do a spoiler cast. It's just a case of, is Bally ever going to finish Fire Emblem to do a spoiler cast on Fire Emblem?
Good point. Devin says, hey, MBZ and Bally, thought I'd throw in my top 5 games of the year in no order for the show. Today.
Yeah.
Number 5, Fire Emblem 3. Well, these aren't in order, obviously. Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I think I'd be crucified from the crossover fans on our 2 shows if I didn't put this on my list. As a full package, 3 Houses is probably the best Fire Emblem game we've gotten since Radiant Dawn. While I think the game has big issues, mainly in its map design and lackluster weapon arts systems, IS and Koei Tecmo has clearly put a lot of love into this game. They gave the fans what they wanted, a game that is focused and well-told narrative. Even though I think there are still some glaring issues with the narrative in Three Houses, there were huge strides made forward. Each student gets substantially more development than previous recruitable units, and the three protagonists are all wonderful in their own right. More than anything, I'm excited to see where the series will go from here. FE4/5 remakes, please. Devin's got number 4, Tetris 99. Number 3, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Number 2, Slay the Spire is the best roguelite I've played since The Binding of Isaac. The game is nearly flawlessly balanced and handles difficulty in a pretty genius manner, as almost an evolution of the 1.0 to 9.0 scale of Smash/Kid Icarus Uprising. All three fourth currently in development characters play radically different and require very different strategies. It's outstanding in 2019, and this game will only be better a few years from now when there are more characters and unlocks. And number 1, Dragon Quest XI S. This is the only game that is ranked. DQ11 is beautiful, heartfelt, sprawling, and nearly perfect. The game refines classic RPG elements in a truly loving manner. To me, this is what Octopath should have been. The party is one of the best I've ever seen in an RPG. The battle system is classic, with enough modern touches to feel fresh, and it's probably one of the best looking games on Switch. This, to me, is easily one of the best games of the decade, and I'm excited to try out the rest of the series. And there you have it. Overall, it has been a remarkably solid year for games, even if there were some tragic delays. Last of Us 2, Animal Crossing, Metroid, etc. Happy holidays and happy 2010s. I hope you two have a nice rest of the year, and I wish you luck in the next decade.
Thank you, Devin, very much. Bally, I'm the one who dunked on Octopath, but I'm going to thank Devin for dunking on it as well. Shout out, dunk on Octopath all day. No, you should play Dragon Quest. It is a great entry point to that series. It is fucking long, but it's very delightful.
I've got a really good track record with long games this year, so
no, yeah. I know for sure. That will make a lot of sense. And Devin was the one who told me I should play Slay the Spire, so I'm going to blame him for the arguments that we're about to have, basically.
Okay.
So, yes. We then have our last one, I think, from Maitreya, who writes at number 5, Pokemon Sword. The wild area is good, and raids make the game feel more friend/community based, which Game Freak should expand on in future games. I think it's a solid entry in the Pokemon series, but that's about it. It doesn't really compete with 4th to 5th gen, but is definitely better than the 3DS Pokemon games. Number 4, Super Mario Maker 2. I wish I liked this game more. Playing this made me realise I didn't really enjoy 2D Mario platforming as much as I remember. I guess I've been spoiled by Celeste and other platformers. Building Mario levels is still amazing, but once my friends moved on, I had a lot less fun sharing them. Number 3, Wargroove. Really nice game with a lot of content for a low price. I never played Advance Wars, so I don't have much to compare it to, but I really enjoyed the combat, the characters, and especially the dialogue. Number 2, Untitled Goose Game. Wow, didn't expect this to land at number 2. I had fun playing through the game by myself, but where this really shined is playing around a friend's house with 3 others. I knew all the solutions, but it also gave a different experience watching my friends all try to figure it out. Honk honk. Number 1, Fire Emblem Three Houses. This really is my kind of game. Pretty much everything that's most important to me in this genre. FE Three Houses hits really well. Customization and freedom when building units, fun and varied strategy, and a really great cast. I could go on about everything I love and the few things I hope to see they improve on, but put it simply, this is easily my favourite 2019 game. So yeah, pretty solid list there. I think the realization that you don't like 2D Mario is in line with us, so high five. And Wargroove, I'm sure it's a game that we'll talk about next segment.
Oh, most definitely.
Great, well thank you everybody for sending in all of your video games of 2019 of the year. We probably have a lot of these on our list, and it is now probably time to go and talk about those. So, before we go, Bally, remind them of the email address. And
yes, the email address is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We want your predictions for 2020, because we're going to be talking about that on the next show. But as you said, MBZ, it's time to roll into the third segment, and we're going to be talking about our own game of 2019.
Alright folks, welcome back to the final segment of the year, officially, of a Nintendo podcast, because of course we have like other 2 more podcasts a year, but don't listen to those just yet.
It's a busy December, okay?
Listen to this one first, because this is the very important one. We're going to talk about the best Nintendo video games of 2019, and according to Bally, who I don't know if I trust with maths, but tells me we have 25 games to talk about on this list, which is pretty long. I think that's probably the most video games we've had from Nintendo in a year that we have played. 2017 might rival it, but I feel like there's a lot of shorter games in here, smaller indie games that we got to that have probably changed why there are so many, which is good, because there's lots of good stuff this year, and it's been a weird year overall, I think, for video games. Just if we're talking about the big AAA stuff, like, and that's the way that people define years, but I think it's been pretty damn good, and I've enjoyed myself a lot.
Very strong year. Yeah, loads of small stuff I had no idea about last year that just sort of appeared out of nowhere this year, played and loved it, so that's always strong. I think there were some surprises about the games I already knew about that we can get to. And then, and as you say, everyone's kind of got different and unique games of the year this year. Often
it's an eclectic choice, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then, as you say, the critical focus on AAAs has been, it's been a bad year, or it's dull. But I think this list will prove that is wrong, and that there has just been so much strong stuff that is maybe not top tier when it comes to investment in the game. Like, it's not AAA, but it's still, if not a better game, honestly, many of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the rules here. We are doing a ranked top 10. That means we will choose 10 games and then rank them in order from 10 to 1, which means we must cut 15 games from this list. That's basically going to be the process. We're going to start out by deciding what's going to go on, what's going to not go on, and then we'll shuffle it about, and then we'll choose our top 10, rank them in order, and that will be the show, essentially. Anything else you need to add, Bally? Any other weird rules you want to throw in here?
Just a reminder that this is a combined list. We're not doing 2 separate lists. This is one list we're going to debate and put together ourselves.
Yes, exactly. So, the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to read through all the games so that we have a sense of the video games we're talking about, and then we will make decisions going back and forth on what should they be in the top 10, should they not. So the list is as follows: Gato Roboto, Link's Awakening, Untitled Goose Game, Shovel Knight King of Cards, Blazing Chrome, Ape Out, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Mech Extermination Force, Creature in the Well, The Stretchers, Pokemon Sword, Steam World Quest, Wargroove, The Messenger Picnic Panic, Cadence of Hyrule, Luigi's Mansion 3, Astral Chain, Mario Maker 2, Labo VR, Katana Zero, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Slay the Spire, Dauntless, Dragon Quest Builders 2, and Piku Niku. It's a long list of video games.
Is Picnic Panic not an expansion?
It is, but so is King of Cards. Are you going to cut that?
That's a bit more standalone, but I would argue King of Cards was more standalone, but I can see what you're saying.
You know what, Bally? If The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine came out on Switch, I would argue that that's a Game of the Year candidate, because that thing is basically a whole game. It's weird, right? Like, I don't know. We've got Toy-Con VR on this list, so...
Well, I agree. I think that can probably be cut, but we can at least we can discuss them anyway.
Also, like, we decide what the Games of the Year list is defined by, so if we want it to be fucking Yoshi's Crafted World, even though neither of us have played that, why don't we?
In the past, we've counted Shovel Knight expansions as standalone games, and generally we haven't counted other stuff. That's all I would say, but we can always redefine.
We don't really play DLC, so I think that's
we don't really.
It's a false equivalency, but we'll. Look, if I'm frankly honest with you, Messenger Picnic Panic's not getting on this list.
I'm just
fucking thing frustrated the shit out of me. So
it's like, I don't mean to fall out with you already. But...
I know. But I will damn well try. So let's start out with what should be on the list, right?
We're going to start positive, go back and forth.
Yes.
Game that we think should be in the top 10. Do you want to go first?
Yes. Luigi's Mansion 3 should be in the top 10.
I definitely agree. Let me get that up there.
Cool. Let's put it on the list.
Okay. I'm going to back Wargroove to be top 10.
Sure. War Groove. Is it 2 words or is it 1 word?
I don't know.
Does it matter? Probably not. I want Fire Emblem 3 Houses on the list.
Okay.
I think it deserves to be there on this list of video games. Of top 10 video games.
You know what? I actually think it's now hard already in some aspects. I don't mean hard, but I think those 3 games we've just mentioned are quite easy to discuss and we can agree they're top 10. I think there's a real grey area from like potentially 4 to 15. Roughly. Like, okay. So I think the next one's going to be difficult, but I think we should at least attempt to put something up, or maybe just put something up for now. Say.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
I'm going to stick to a game we've both played for this one. I know there's one standing out to me that I know you'll be keen on as well. I'm going to suggest Ape Out.
Okay, sure.
For now?
Sure. We'll put it on for now. It's not binding. There's no contract here.
It's not binding.
I like it.
We're going to do a vote, but it doesn't count. Like on Triumph.
Yes. Slay the Spire.
I was going to say, you were going to
10.
say Slay the Spire.
Slay the Spire is on the top 10.
Yeah.
Of course it is. It's not a question.
Okay.
Any suggestions from you? Because I've got one more that I want on the top 10 for Shuzzle. For Shuzzle for Nuzzle.
Stuff where I like that I know I can reach out and get consensus support.
Uh-huh.
I'm already struggling a bit more.
Okay.
I think King of Cards should probably be up there.
Really? Okay.
Don't feel strongly about it. Maybe I should wait on that because
maybe see.
stuff I personally feel much more strongly about. I'll attempt a more personal one and just see what you think.
Okay.
No, I'll go less personal. I think Link's Awakening should be in the top 10, I think. I think I probably like that game more than you.
We'll put it on there for now.
We can go on there for now.
For now.
Sounds like you were dying to say a game.
Bloodstained Ritual of the Night has to be on this list.
Bloodstained? Okay.
Absolutely. Now, here's the thing, right? It's weird because this is a Nintendo Games of the Year list. I probably wouldn't put the Switch version of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night on a list like this, but the version I played was very, very good, and I played it on PC, but it is on Switch. It's a weird situation, right? Because there are those types of games where it's like The Witcher 3's on Switch. Would I put The Witcher 3 on my top 100 games on Switch? Probably not. I'd put the PC version on my top 100 games. But it is available there, so it's a weird... I don't know. I don't really know what are your thoughts on that situation? Because I know they've patched it now. Like, it is better than it was, but it was a fucking terrible thing before.
When we were doing our top 50 games of all time and we weren't counting, like, you know, Witcher 3, as you said... Witcher 3, by being like an open world game, and it is a lot more driven by the power of a machine, it doesn't feel like a very... I was going to say, it doesn't feel like a very Nintendo system game, but then obviously you got Breath of the Wild, so like you're already eating your own tail in a way. But I was going to suggest that the style of game that Bloodstained is, like it is a Metroidvania, is like a very Nintendo system thing, even though it wasn't running very well initially. I don't know how patched it's been, I don't know, but...
I've heard it's better. I don't know how much better, and I don't know what that means for playability. So that's the question.
I feel more comfortable it being on this list than in principle than Witcher 3.
Okay, that's fine.
But I was just about to say we're already down to 3 more. We're already on 7 games.
That's fine. Should we start cutting things then? Because I feel like we've decided those are the ones that we really would like to be in there. And we can swap them out. So.
I mean, there's definitely some in the lower list I feel more strongly about than the top list.
Okay,
we
that's
can
fine.
Get there.
Yeah.
I would immediately love to cut Creature in the Well.
Yes, I agree with you, 100%.
There was just lots of things about that game that just weren't working for us.
Yeah, like fundamentally, I like the idea of Creature in the Well. I do like
the aesthetic.
Yeah, it's really cool. It has this really great look to it, and the feel. Like I like a lot of the ideas. Ultimately, it was too repetitive, and then it had the worst difficulty spike I've experienced in a long time in a game. It just felt like so much of it was out of your control because of the random nature of the pinballs, and I wish that it would have been a bit more tightly designed, because it's a good idea on paper. It just didn't work for me. I think I'm just in the market now for not having pinball games that aren't just pinball. Because, like, Yoku I didn't really agree with, and I didn't really get on with Creature in the Well. And I was like, oh, these are really cool ideas, but ultimately they're cool ideas that didn't execute for me, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I'd rather just play Pokemon Pinball.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Or there's a pinball game that just came out on Game Pass called Demon's Tilt. I think John Lindemann talked about it on the recent episode of RFN. I want to try that out. It seems pretty cool. Pinball's cool. I like pinball. I would move to cut Piku Niku, a game that is a weird game that I played because it was free on Twitch Prime. But yeah, it's nothing special at all. It's just very weird. And yes, I don't have an opinion on it, really. It's probably the game I have a least opinion on in this entire list. I just don't have any feelings anyway about it. So I guess it's not really worth putting anywhere on the list.
A game that I've played that you've not, that I don't think makes the list, I had a good time with it, is The Stretchers.
Okay, fair enough.
It's cool, it's quirky. I think if you're into co-op zaniness, it's really worth playing. I think that co-op experience is completely dominated by a game like Overcooked, and I'd also rate Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time much better than it, but if you want short and quirky, and it's like a zany open world to kind of drive around in, which is so weird in like a co-op game like that, I'd recommend it. But I think I'm gonna have too rough of a time trying to get that up here, and I don't know if it would even make a personal top 10. So
yeah, that's
I'll
fair.
cut that.
I will cut The Messenger Picnic Panic. It's really annoying.
You had real issues with that thing.
Yeah, like fundamentally, I like The Messenger a lot.
Don't replay the final boss in order to access DLC.
Oh yeah, no, I even forgot about that. But, Jesus, I know my memory of that is just like there being a lot of very difficult things that were frustratingly difficult that I didn't enjoy as much. Like, it's got some good variety to it, right? Like, it does some weird stuff. The final boss fight is basically Punch Out, and like, that's cool. I like that. Boy, that thing is it's a step up in difficulty, and the game was also pretty difficult to begin with. So yeah. Also, like, we called into question its eligibility in the first place. Maybe we should make some rules about that, but I don't think we need to. Because if there is a DLC that comes out that's like...
We can do it when it's better DLC. We'll make the rule then.
We'll make the rule when we decide the rule needs to be broken, essentially.
Exactly, that's when rules are changed.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Do you have a choice to cut here, Bally?
I'll drop Toy-Con 4 VR kit.
Otherwise known as Labo VR.
Labo VR. I think it's unbelievably cool that Nintendo actually did VR-related stuff this year. No one was predicting it. Nintendo had said some very negative stuff about VR in the past, and then they were like, yeah, we're going to give it a go, and here's some Zelda functionality and some Mario Odyssey functionality, and that was weird. I had a good time with it. It's nothing in comparison to the higher tech VR. I obviously own a PSVR, and I'm a big fan of that, and it was a real jump down, but that's not the point of it. The point is, let's let everyone experience some VR who doesn't want the high price threshold that a lot of these other systems have. So I think it's a really cool idea, but it's not gonna break the top 10.
Yeah. Also, it's not really a game. There's a game in it.
It's a toy.
Yeah. It's it was an on-rail shooter. You shoot those pink aliens.
There's some cool little levels there.
Some really good boss fights. Really enjoyed those.
It's a good sense of scale, and like all the stuff that I thought was strong about Astrobot with the scale of some of the boss fights, it replicates a lot of those feelings for a much cheaper price. So it's cool.
Good entry point for sure. Okay,
getting real hard now.
So I'm going to cut this one just because I didn't finish it. I loved it. I had a great time. But Dragon Quest Builders 2 is a game that I didn't expect to play this year at all. I won it in a Twitter giveaway, which was very fun. And I was like, okay, well, let's give this a go. Because I played the demo for Builders 1 on PS4 years ago, and I was like, this is pretty cool. It's like kind of more structured Minecraft. And I played through basically the first area of Dragon Quest Builders 2 of like 5 areas, and the first area took me like 15 hours. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be long. I don't have the investment to stay in this for this long, but it was such an enjoyable time because it really gave me Stardew Valley vibes. You do a lot of crops building up of like your kind of farmland to like do the quests, and then you get resources. All your villagers, like you build them toilets and stuff. It's very funny. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of which is pretty good, but it's also kind of superfluous. It's just worth skipping through because a lot of it just is very meaningless. And the combat is kind of barren. It's very bare bones, but it's a really fun thing to explore. And they do the Breath of the Wild thing where if you jump off a thing, you have a little kind of cape that you put above your head and kind of float down, which is, I think every open world thing needs to have that these days. It's just such a good traversal mechanic that I very much enjoy. But I didn't finish the game, and
Okay, that's fair.
In a list where there's lots of things vying for the last few spots here, it's not gonna make it.
Yeah, this is getting really hard already.
Yeah.
Right,
because so many of these games I feel now are
it just depends on your mood, the day of the week, you know.
Yeah,
like a lot of these
yeah.
Any of these I think could squeeze in the bottom.
Sure, for sure.
I'd personally like to try and push stuff that we've both played.
Yes.
And in line with that, I'm going to try and cut stuff that I've played. So I'm not going to try and cut anything that you've only played right now.
Okay.
I'm just going to suggest, and you've played this more recently than me. I had some issues with this game. I'm going to suggest cutting Cadence of Hyrule.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that it does a good job of tricking you into thinking it's a Zelda game when it just totally isn't a Zelda game.
Yeah.
I think that beyond the incredible music and
which is amazing,
which
probably
is incredible,
soundtrack of the year,
and some really cool sprite design, I don't think the mechanics actually hold up that well. Personally, like I feel
like it takes you time to get into it as well. And but when you do. Thing is, when you find a groove, I do really like it. Like, you do kind of hit this rhythm and you're just like, okay, I'm in the zone. And when you're in the zone, it feels great. But I think that eventually you get to this point where it starts out really... It's a weird difficulty curve because it starts out really high and then drops off and then kind of goes up again. It's like... Yeah, it's a very strange game in that sense. And
like, I love we always said we love the principle of like Nintendo offloading a bit of their IP to another developer, and it has worked well. Like, this game is good. I just don't feel like it's making this list this year.
Yeah, I that's fair. I think that it definitely, like, for me, it's more what it represents than what it actually is as a game. Because I think what it represents is fundamentally huge. Like, it's a big shift in what Nintendo's approach is. Right. And I don't know if that's just... It might just be one scenario that will never happen again. It might just be, hey, the people who make a lot of business decisions, like what Brace Yourself Games did with Crypt of the Necrodancer, and thought, what if we did that with one of our IP? But, you know, it could be a trend going forward. I'd like it to be a trend. So we'll see.
Cool.
Okay, well, we now have quite a few games on here. This is one of the tricky things. I've been trying to get you to play Katana Zero all year, and
it's totally Zero... my fault for not having played that. It's a game I could have. It's a short game. I could have played it, and I just haven't got around to it. And I appreciate it makes it difficult.
It's a game that is absolutely in my personal top 10.
Okay.
So I like it a lot, but I do realize that, like, there are other games on here which maybe we would like to reward more because we both have played them and we both really enjoyed them.
I think there's about roughly 3 to 4 games in here that would make my personal top 10. So I think
I'm gonna cut Dauntless. Dauntless, probably not even in my own top 10, but it's a game I've played a stupid amount of this year. I played fucking loads of it on PC, and then it came to Switch like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and the Switch version, in line with the PS4 version, has one of the worst frame rates I've seen in my life. In the there's a hub area basically, and when you're running around the hub area, it chugs to fuck, and I'm like, okay, well, I can deal with this because when you're actually on the hunts, when you're actually fighting monsters, the Switch version does maintain a pretty solid 30, so it works and runs really nicely on Switch, and I have played another 4 hours of it probably on Switch, just jumping back in and being like, oh yeah, I remember the loop of this, why I really liked it. And ultimately, I play Dauntless and I'm like, why am I playing this? Because there's really no end goal aside from you just kill monsters to get stuff to make cooler armor. And like, I don't know why I'm doing it.
But I think cool armor.
I love cool armor. But the thing is it just feels really good. And I think it's one of those things where mastering a weapon and like S-ranking a monster or doing really well against one feels great. Like, just having the patterns memorized, knowing like how to knock them, because doing damage to enemies in a really significant manner requires a lot of specific skill, and knocking them out of a phase they're in and staggering them so you can all wail on them at once just is a great feeling. And I mainly played the lance as my main weapon, and the lance is a lot of fun. It's got a lot of versatility to it, and it does have that kind of thing which lets you knock enemies out of charge states so that they can get wailed on. And I recently started playing with one of the new weapons, which are like kind of ethereal punching gloves that are really fast and very enjoyable, and they have a lot of complexity to their moveset as well, and learning how to build up all these different things. I like Dauntless a huge amount. You should download it and we should play a little bit of it together at some point. Yes, I didn't expect to, because look, we've never gotten into Monster Hunter, and this is basically like, what if Monster Hunter but without all the bullshit? And I've realized that I kind of do like it, despite it being different in a lot of ways to Monster Hunter. It's very good. I've played a lot of it. It's one of those weird games where it's like, I put loads of hours into this, it's still not making my top 10. You know, it's very weird. But that's the case with Dauntless.
Cool. I'm going to suggest cutting a game that I've actually spent probably more time than a lot of these shorter games on, even though I didn't do much with it. I'm going to suggest cutting Mario Maker 2. Now,
oh boy.
Hear me out. I think there's a lot of freshness in this list. And I'd like to reward that. And like, I think that we can have a very fresh, new top 10. Now, I'm not saying these are hard and fast rules. I'm just saying there's a lot of really cool, fresh, new stuff that I like, that we're still in this middle zone, that I would rather push up than I would like to just argue Mario Maker 2 can slide into the list, if that makes sense. Like, and I think that I personally, Mario Maker is not necessarily my personal thing. I have a lot of respect for Mario Maker, both 1 and 2, and I think that the download that they finally did with the link stuff is cool. I've not personally dived into it massively. There's just a ton of stuff to play right now. There always is. But I don't know if I'd feel comfortable about this game making the top 10. And as a result, I'd like to see it down.
Yeah, I can't really argue with you. This is the thing. Like, I've put 55, 60 hours into Mario Maker 2.
Well, that's the thing. And like, I think you have a lot more to say about it from that sense, because you have put so much more time into it. But at the same time, I just think there's some really, really great shorter games left that I'd rather put up.
Yeah, and like, Mario Maker scratched my Switch screen, so fuck that game.
Yeah, it's me too.
I mean, it was my fault, but you know, I'll blame Mario Maker for it. No, here's the thing. When I was making that fucking Link level, I was so fucking frustrated with the interface of designing levels in Mario Maker 2. It is not as streamlined as the first game. Fundamentally, like, the little bars that pop in and out, you can't, like, there's no toggle to, like, move them out of your way. So, like, if Mario is, like, on one side of the screen, trying to get him so I can move him to a place is a exercise in fucking frustration. It drove me up the goddamn wall. And I really dislike, because the Switch is fundamentally, you can design on TV or you can design on the gamepad. The interface is built around gamepad, and that is not the optimal way to play Mario Maker or make levels, which causes it to just not be well designed for touchscreen use. It just isn't as good as the Wii U interface, and that is infuriating to me, because they perfected it. They nailed it first time out. And Nintendo has this constant thing where they're like, well, how about if we put the stylus up your butt instead of put on this side of it? It's like, fuck off, Nintendo. You fixed the stylus. It was in the right place to begin with. You stupid... drives me insane. Yeah. So ultimately, that kind of frustration that I experienced going back to the game, I was like, you know what? I love Mario Maker as a concept. It is one of the best ideas Nintendo has had in so long, but it's not the same as the first game, and it doesn't have the impact.
Yeah. And I still can't find my damn list of friends. Like, I just can't.
Yeah,
find
I know.
them.
Like, the interface stuff, and Nintendo haven't supported it.
You're like, oh, Dali made a new level. Do you want to try it? I'm like, okay. How do I find your level?
It's like 10 minutes later. It's like, where is it now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer, man. That game could have been so much better. And it's still good. Like, you can still make amazing levels. It's still really
spent like 15 to 20 hours with that game, you know, even if I did make only like 2-3 levels. But like, it's a good game.
Yeah, it is. But we're talking about the best of the best here, and I don't think it hangs.
It's a tough year.
It's a tough year. I propose... What if we put Blazing Chrome on the top 10?
Yeah, I think it would struggle to make my personal one, but...
It doesn't make mine either. But I was just wondering, because I know you really enjoyed it. You probably enjoyed it a bit more than I did. And we had a great time with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so maybe me saying it wouldn't make my personal top 10... There's a lot of stuff here I'd rather push first.
Sure.
But it might be a good unifying candidate later.
Maybe.
We don't know.
I don't know what to do with Blazing Chrome, because it's looking at me and it's like, hey, you played this together co-op this year. It was Contra, but modern, and was very good. And
it was very good. I ultimately had a much better time with Nidhogg 2.
I mean, yeah, but
I'll
that didn't
say
come
that,
out this year.
But that's obviously a different category. But,
yeah, and that's competitive versus cooperative, so...
Well, I was just going to say, also, it didn't come out this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I said, yeah.
Oh, sorry, right. Yeah, no. Let's leave it for now.
Okay, we'll just leave it.
Because it kind of feels weird dropping it right now.
Yeah. How do you feel about Gato Roboto? Because Gato Roboto...
I love Gato Roboto.
I like a lot, but also I haven't thought about it at all since I beat it.
Really?
Like, it's one of those games I played and then just left my brain space. Which I think says something about...
For me, it's one of those games I knew nothing about. Someone said it was good. Then you were like, oh, Bally, you should try it. And I downloaded it, beat it in like the space of like a day and really loved it. Like, it's... I'd like to see it at the lower end of our list. I would like to see it in the list, but I can totally vouch for that. It'll not get anywhere near out of the bottom 2, maybe.
It's one of those games where, like, I would rather this than Link's Awakening on the list, honestly.
I don't know if I'd say that about this game, but I can definitely see a place where we take out Link's Awakening and put in some fresher stuff.
Yes, yeah.
But my fresh thing that I liked a lot that's left, I'd love to push up, would actually be Untitled Goose Game.
And I'm fine with that. I think Untitled Goose Game can be on the lower end of the list.
Okay. So...
Should we put...
I'll happily drop Gato Roboto and in return, like, we put Untitled Goose Game up. Is that what you're suggesting?
Sure, we'll just put Untitled Goose Game for now. We'll see how we feel about Gato Roboto. In that case, then, I would love to just have Katana Zero. If we're both putting personal picks on there, out of the rest of these games, Katana Zero is the one I probably feel the most passionate about.
Yeah, like, I don't think you're going to get away with Katana Zero and Astral Chain up there, for example.
No, and I'm not...
But I think that you can definitely pick one or the other.
I'm not pushing for Astral Chain at all. It's a really good game. Again, I don't know if it makes my top 10 this year either. But it's on the edge.
You happy with me dropping Astral Chain now?
Sure. Shout out to Astral Chain, though. It's really fun. It's... I like that it expands the scope of what a Platinum game can be, because so often Platinum games are just like, it's pure action and hell bent for leather. And this game is like, I really enjoy just running around the hub areas as a police person and picking up trash and talking to NPCs and collecting the red stuff on the floor. Best things in video game, like best like little mechanics, Astral Chain nailed it. Just throwing away things into the bin feels great. Collecting the red goop on the ground with your Legion, so good. Like, I just love those little mechanical touches. And even like in the combat, wrapping your chain around an enemy and staggering them, some really great combos, just switching between your legions. Great game feel. I think it's too long. I think it's just a bit too bloated for its own good, but a very fun game, and really glad that I played it this year. It's very cool. Astral Chain is... Shout out to Astral Chain.
Nice.
Good job, Astral Chain.
There's one game here...
Yes.
That I think sums up our personal preferences about like what we like in games. It went crazy under the radar this year. I really like it. It's definitely in my personal top 10. And it kind of does a lot of things that we just love in games, and that's Mech Extermination Force.
I think that is like Bertel Hallberg's games are my like end of the list like inclusions, right? Gunman Clive, spoiler for my top 100 list. Gunman Clive 1 and 2 are my number 100 game on that list. Extermination Force to me is like, this is our like symbolic number 10, right? That's how I feel about it personally.
Yeah, like I'd be happy if it was number 10. I feel quite strongly that it probably should be in our top 10. And I can't remember where it is in my personal top 10, but it's definitely in there. But then at the same time, that would be us relegating Pokemon Sword, Blazing Chrome, Shovel Knight, Gato Roboto, SteamWorld Quest. Like, we just need to have a discussion.
Right, but this is our list, right? And we can also take out Link's Awakening because, frankly, I've cooled on Link's Awakening. Like, I beat that game in a very short space of time. Yeah. But just thinking back on it and being like, actually, this game design is old and like, Turtle Rock still... Turtle Rock is annoying, but also fucking Eagle's Tower still fucking sucks.
In the year of so much fresh stuff... It does feel weird, Link's Awakening just sliding in there for a new art style.
Yeah, I don't think it deserves it. I just don't think it deserves to be on the list.
And I obviously I don't think the dungeon design is as bad as you think, but even with that, I think there's an argument to be made that it doesn't make this top 10, as you say.
Yeah.
Okay, so for now, can we slide in Extermination Force and take out Link's Awakening?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, I think that leaves us with one slot still.
Yes, it does. Which is tricky. I really loved Pokemon, but it's Pokemon, right? Like that's the problem. Is like I had a great time with it. So much of my joy with Pokemon was like, oh shit, look at that thing. I've not seen that before. Wow. I wonder what it evolves into, and then be like, oh my god, it's evolving. Like I've not had that feeling of what is this? It's evolving since probably playing Blue when I was a kid. You know, it also has to do with the fact that I'm very much less engaged with the community, so I just wasn't paying attention to anything. So, kind of my own. It's one of those things of like, if Pokemon Sword had been spoiled in terms of knowing the Pokemon, I probably would have had a much worse time with the game overall.
Okay, yeah, that was definitely your favorite thing about the game, right? Was
100%.
The freshness of the new designs of Pokemon.
Yes.
Above other things.
And like, I would give it brownie points for being so good in terms of competitive just openness, like making the game so much more accessible for people in terms of if they want to play online against people, they can do all these options. It's so much more streamlined. But then they instituted a 20-minute time limit for battles, and I was like, "Well, you just undid all of your goodwill. Why in heaven's name is that ever a good idea? It's not. It's a terrible decision, frankly, that ruins any desire I have to ever get back into competitive on the actual game itself. I've played some Showdown since, which is the metagame's pretty cool. I like it. It seems refined in terms of it's paired back. You're seeing things in there that aren't really that used, like Seismitoad's fucking up there in OU right now, I think, which is weird. But hey, that's how it goes. So is that being cut? I don't know.
We can leave it there for now. I was just going to say, you said very strongly when you played this game that SteamWorld Quest is your favorite image and form game.
It is, 100%. And I think at the point at which I was talking about it, I hadn't finished it. And I definitely think
and you hadn't played Slay the Spire.
Yes, and I definitely think the latter half of the game is weaker because you get a lot of characters, and in terms of leveling them, it doesn't balance it out perfectly.
The final boss is miserable.
Miserable. It took me 45 minutes, and then I died, and I had to do it again.
I loved the deck building. I loved the first 4 or 5 hours.
Yes.
And it was just that. There's a point at which there were just too many cards, and a point at which the enemies became too damage spongy.
I got intimidated, you know? Like, I just got to a point where I'm like, it's such a limited amount of cards you can have in your hand.
Yeah.
That it felt like you had to have real understanding of how things synergize together.
You had to be very strict about which strategy you went for and didn't go for. There were so many strategies on offer that you could only incorporate maybe 1.5 into any deck at any given time, that it was like... I don't know. Yeah, I feel more comfortable with it outside the top 10 personally. SteamWorld Quest. There's stuff I feel a lot more strongly about, and it's in that group of games I really love that aren't making this top 10, because I do love that game as much as the final boss is just miserable.
It's true.
So then we're in terms of like a joint last entry to stick on this list.
Yeah.
I'm feeling warmer about our discussion about what we've said about Shovel Knight King of Cards or Blazing Chrome. I think Gato Roboto you clearly don't like.
No, it's not that I don't like it.
Not as much as me. I couldn't get my sentence out fast enough.
Right.
But
Okay.
You don't like it as much as me. You like that game a lot.
I played it and I had a great time.
Yeah.
But then I think for me, the mark of a game that should be on Game of the Year is one that sticks with you and you think about it for the rest of the year.
See, for me it does that, but I can appreciate it doesn't for you.
I don't know why. I played it, I finished it, I had a great time, loved it, and then I didn't think about it at all. I just left my brain space. And maybe it's because it is quite derivative in terms of its Metroid influence. It does have a cute aesthetic, but also the black and white thing has been done quite a few times now, Downwell and Minute and stuff like that. Like it's not fresh in that way, so it doesn't quite have the same lasting impact on me, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I can't assess the lasting impact of King of Cards because I've just played it. It's so fresh, and that's the recency bias that's the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas Blazing Chrome, I have thought about. I've thought about it sometimes in being frustrated that we didn't play it on Switch and we had some frame rate problems and things like that.
Yeah.
But also I've thought about it in like, boy, that was one of the hardest things that we have done together, like as a co-op. It was just, and it was fucking hell for leather, and that final boss fight of like fucking green triangles and like blue thingies and
Bally
red.
just can't do the green triangles.
And Bally is like colorblind apparently, but it was just like, oh man, what a thrill when we finally fucking beat that thing. I really enjoyed beating that thing,
I'm feeling, from what we've just said, I am feeling the warmest about getting Blazing Chrome in there then.
Yeah.
In that case. And so we are going to cut Gato Roboto, Shovel Knight King of Cards, Pokemon's World, SteamWorld Quest, like all good to great games in their own right, but
yeah.
Are we happy getting Blazing Chrome in there?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, let's stick it up there.
Man, this is real hard. This is the hardest, I think, bottom half of a list that I've had to figure out.
It's the highest quality bottom half of a list we ever had. Like Link's Awakening is in this list. So with SteamWorld Quest we were really hot on. And we both like Gato Roboto, Shovel Knight King of Cards, which we just played, and like
I also think it speaks to how good independent stuff was this year. Look at our list is just fucking indie rich versus like Mario Maker 2 didn't make it, Astral Chain didn't make it, Link's Awakening.
The number of games in our top 10 that we didn't even know about last year.
Yes. That's very true.
And some in there that we'll get to it, but I was just going to say some that were in there we knew about but were much better than we anticipated or something,
Sure.
Which I think is also important.
Are there any changes you want to make? Is there anything on that list that you feel shouldn't be there or should be replaced with something else? Obviously, I like Astral Chain a lot, but I probably like Astral Chain more than Blazing Chrome, if I'm honest.
Okay.
But again, I'm the only one who's played it. And Link's Awakening, like I loved playing through Link's Awakening, but also like it's a Zelda game. Of course I'm gonna enjoy it because it's inherently Zelda and I like Zelda.
Yeah.
But also I've played that game before, and outside of the art style, which I'll grant you is great, it also has that frame rate issue, which was not great. It is the same game. And this is why for me I had such a hard time of like, do we rank this in our Nintendo 2019 games of the year, or do we do it as old game of the year? Because like in the past, like Xenoblade 3D, you have put in the old games list and stuff like that. Yeah. And this is so much closer to a Xenoblade 3D than it is to a Resident Evil 2 or whatever.
It is. No, I get that. And
totally. I think people are just being tricked by the fact that it's such a facelift. And I'm not going to deny that. It's a remarkable facelift. Like really, huge amount of time and effort went into it, but it is the same fucking game from the 90s. And like waking up the dead corpse of the fucking cuckoo under the well where you have to push the thing by going to the fucking wart and getting the soul.
The MacGuffins.
How does anyone figure that shit out?
Yeah.
Nobody. Like anyone I've listened to who's come to this game for the first time in 2019, I've heard them talk about how they had no idea what to do and always was using a walkthrough constantly.
Yeah. When we've had Link Between Worlds, which you never feel like you're just looking for the MacGuffin to unlock the thing, to do the thing, to do the, it's always like a single step process, and it feels so smooth, so fast. And to play a very traditional style Zelda after Link Between Worlds, it does feel, it's not quite as fun. Like I think that's the easiest way to surmise it, is it just doesn't, getting a guide up online to work out where you're going next can feel like a necessary evil at points, but no matter when you do it with whatever game, you are always sucking out a bit of fun to a degree the second you're having to, get out the laptop, get on. And I never had to do that with Link Between Worlds, and I liked it for that. And that's not to say the game's just easier and I like easy games. I
mean, yes, you do. You're a noob.
I do like easy games, but I like... I've almost kind of set myself like this challenge where if I'm on a puzzle for 10 to 15 minutes and I'm not getting it, I go online. And like I set like my own rules almost. So I was like, right, I'm not going to look online until I'm stuck on this and I felt like I was hitting that wall again and again in Link's Awakening. And even though I've played the game before, and that speaks to my memory of how these things work. But in a year that, like I was saying, is so fresh, and all these arguments I used against Mario Maker 2, there's elements of those arguments that go against Link's Awakening, and there's some really cool stuff here that I'd rather have on this top 10 than this game.
Yeah, that's fair.
It probably will make my own top 10, but I don't think it'll be particularly high, and I think that in the spirit of like our joint list, I think that there's lots of stuff that should be on this list above it.
Yeah.
So I'm personally, I think, happy with this top 10. I like my number 11 on this list is probably Gato Roboto. So, and your number 11, I'm guessing, is Astral Chain?
For this list,
or Steam Quest?
Probably Astral Chain. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Or Pokemon, either Astral Chain or Pokemon.
Okay.
They kind of occupy a similar space for me. How do we feel about Mech-Termination Force versus Gato Roboto? How do you feel personally about those two games?
I enjoyed Mech-Termination Force more. It's stuck in my mind more. I think those boss battles just feel really epic at points.
Yeah.
And Extermination Force was almost the perfect level of difficulty in some ways for my personal gaming skill.
Yes.
Like, it was hard, but it never felt unfair. And that really resonated with me. And I think the art style is beautiful. And also, I feel like a personal pain about how few waves this game made. Like, after Roboto had its own kind of waves and its own unique circles, and that's fine, but like, no one was talking about Extermination Force, and it's a really good game. And almost for that reason, not alone, but it's also an incredibly good game. I really feel strongly that we talk about that game more and have it up on this list.
Yeah. I would say, like, polish-wise, Gato Roboto is definitely a more polished game. Like, I think there are things with the jump in Extermination Force.
It's a much simpler game as well, I don't
and it's a little janky. Like, there are elements of, like, hanging off of some of the robots and some things maybe don't look as streamlined, but I think fundamentally from a gameplay standpoint, it's so much fun. Like, it's just a really enjoyable blast.
Yeah. In a world where we've had Cuphead, I think people who haven't played Extermination Force, if you get that joy of, like, we're just fighting bosses, like, it does that so well. And it's got, like, this neat little hub area. I love the music in the hub area. It's a really great song. I don't know why that's popped into my mind right now, but I just had such good feelings about that game. It felt like a real us game, and I like that a lot about it.
So the other one I want to call out is Ape Out, because you just kind of threw this on the list, and I was like, okay, fine, let's see how it goes.
I appreciate the reason I threw that on is for me in my mind it's out of all these slightly smaller games, it's the top of the list for me. Like, it's the...
Wow. See, Ape Out's not even in my top 10. It's not even close to my top 10. Yeah, not at all. Wow. No way.
If that's the case, I'm happy to have it a little lower on the list. I still feel strongly...
But you still think it's your favourite out of all those types of games?
Out of like Ape Out, Untitled Goose Game,
Yeah.
Extermination Force, Blazing Chrome, Gato Roboto, SteamWorld Quest. Like it's the best out of that bunch.
It's your favorite, okay?
Probably.
I can respect that. It's not that high for me for sure. So that's the one where I was like, well, you kind of just threw that in there early, and I haven't really addressed it at all. So
no, that's fair enough.
I don't know if there's something else that could go there instead of it. But if you do feel that strongly about it, then that's fine. We can leave it there.
I mean, maybe I've over-egged it. Like, I really like Untitled Goose Game, to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of level. I put them both above Extermination Force. I'll give you that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, are you talking about whether they should be in the top 10, or are we now ordering top 10?
Whether it should be in the top 10.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we are 100% happy with our top 10 right now.
Yeah.
In terms of the games that are on it.
Like, I prefer Ape Out considerably more than Gato Roboto, SteamWorld Quest, Extermination Force. The one that rivals it is Untitled Goose Game. But I'm keen for it on this list.
Yeah. Let me do some maths here. Let me see. Okay, it's I'm trying to think how many of my games, how many of your games are on here, and if we've just
I think it should be fair.
I think it feels pretty balanced to me generally.
Fair.
From what
off the top of my head, Luigi's
at.
Mansion we've both played. Wargroove I've played. Well, you've played a bit.
Fire
Emblem I've played a bit. You've played. Ape Out we've both played. Slay the Spire you've played. Bloodstained you've played. Untitled Goose Game I've played. Katana you've played. Extermination Force. We've both played. Blazing Chrome we both played. So if anything, it is more in favour on your side. I'd argue,
you're right.
Because of Bloodstained and Slay the Spire. But I think overall, I think I'm happy with where we've got to, because you do love those games a lot, and I think it's fair more or less. And it's feeling too short term to know how we feel about King of Cards.
Yes, I've had a great time with King of Cards, and like I would love to be like, shout out to Yacht Club, they did it. They finished their behemoth.
But we're in the mood to reward freshness right now. I'm feeling, and these games feel fresh. Even like the sequels, they feel fresh. And
well, I don't know. Blazing Chrome is Contra, so how fresh is that really?
Blazing Chrome is the least fresh out of the bunch. I'll give you that. But the others...
but it is like I think Blazing Chrome as experiences of 2019, it's up there. It was a fucking. We just went for that shit, and we were like, God, when we're going through that level where you are like falling through it, or you're like on jetpacks or whatever, and it's like behind the back, and you're going through the tunnel and like shooting things in front of you. It's like the Star Fox section essentially.
Yeah. Oh God, that was miserable.
We were losing our goddamn minds, being like, God damn it.
I like this thing that we've built up a bit in the last few years, where I'll come round to your house and we beat a game in that day. So I almost started with like Affordable Space Adventures, and then it was like I'm going to watch Bally play Brothers, and then it was A Way Out, and then it was Blazing Chrome this year.
We did Contra 3 as well when I came to Brussels.
Contra 3 we did in Brussels. So like it's that idea of like we're going to take a co-op game or semi-co-op game and beat it start to finish in a day, and those games do really stick with me just for nostalgia reasons and hanging out, and it's been a great time. So I do think that's a legitimate way it should be rewarded. Like it's cool,
definitely. And I mean, you know what, you can say that for any game really, because multiplayer, like when you're playing something with somebody else,
it's very hard
just makes
to
it better. But I still think the game is really good. Like, you think about how well made it is, like, how much it nails the Contra aesthetic, and also, like, does its own thing. I think it definitely should be rewarded for that.
Yeah.
So we happy with that? SteamWorld Quest is the one where I'm like, man, I would have loved to reward Image and Form 1 year, because this is...
It didn't stick the landing.
It didn't stick the landing. Like, it is my favourite SteamWorld game still, probably, even after that stuff. But... yeah, and a year where I played Slay the Spire and realised, oh God, actually, there's kind of a better version of this. It's rough, man. That's a rough draw, because it was early in the year, and I was very much like, this is probably going to make my top 10. It's probably going to stay high up there. It just doesn't quite make it. And the other one I would feel passionate about in some degree is Mario Maker 2, but I think we've discussed the reasons why it's not. It just doesn't break it in this list.
What's the line Kylo Ren says in Last Jedi?
Let old things die.
Let old things die.
And Mario Maker's not that old, really.
No, I know.
Also, in that case, Blazing Chrome should be off the list. So should Bloodstained.
Totally.
So should, a few of these games.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a top 10, I think. So now we have to order the top 10. So let's read down the list then. What we currently have, the 10 games we have currently that we have to order. In no particular order, we've just thrown them in. Luigi's Mansion 3, Wargroove, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Ape Out, Slay the Spire, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Untitled Goose Game, Katana Zero, Mechtermination Force, and Blazing Chrome.
Shall we try and start positive again and just try and push some stuff up into top 5 and then maybe come up with our number 10?
If you want. I mean, it's going to be hard, I think. I definitely think Ape Out should not be in the top 5.
I can agree with that. I was gonna see, I was saying starting positive, you meant to say
I know, but making the top 5 requires taking things out of the top 5.
I was going to suggest, I think Luigi's Mansion 3, Wargroove, and Fire Emblem Three Houses should be top 5.
Well, yeah, they're the 3 we straight away put on the list, so
yeah.
that
so
makes sense.
Think they're the ones we care the most about. Shall we
Yes.
stick them top 5 for now?
Sure.
Okay, I'll just create a gap like that. There we go.
I will. Well, we'll see. We're gonna have to.
Okay. No, I mean it's not locked. It's just.
I mean, those were the 3. Just we said straight away.
Yeah,
It doesn't necessarily mean that they are the top 3 because there are other games on this list I like more than those 3 games.
Totally.
Yes.
Shall we go for number 10 now then?
Yeah, number 10. I think it's between Mechtermination Force and Blazing Chrome.
I think I agree, yeah.
I would say probably as it is, right? Like,
I think so. So that's Blazing Chrome at 10 and Mechtermination Force at 9.
Yeah, and I think it's unfair of me to say, frame rate issues with Blazing Chrome because we played it in circumstances where I had a laptop and I didn't have the best way to play it, and we had problems with the input on the controller, and it wasn't doing the angles properly, and that probably contributed to us dying a lot.
Yeah, and it ended up being doable. Like, yes, we beat that game, so
we did, but it would have been nice to actually have a better environment to play that, maybe.
Did we use save states? I can't even remember now.
There's no. It's a new game, Bally. It doesn't have save states.
No, I know, but you can't do that with your laptop or something.
No. It's not an emulator. It's just on Game Pass. It's just a game on a computer.
I'm just saying you can't make a save state on Game Pass now. Okay.
No, there's no save state. Save states on emulators, Bally. That doesn't. When I just play a PC game, I can't just save state whenever I want. I mean, there are some PC games where yes, you can.
Yeah, that's
quick
what
save.
I meant. Yeah, sorry.
You can quick save or whatever.
I don't always articulate clearly.
No, I know what you mean.
Which is a great trait for a podcast.
Oh no, brilliant! Of just the best, perfect. Because there are games like Witcher 3 where you can just hit F5 and it quick saves, and you'll just reload in exactly the place you were. Or even in Half-Life, like PC style games like that. Yes, you can do that, but Blazing Chrome is not one of those games. It just so happens to be on PC.
Okay.
So Extermination Force at 9. Are we happy with that?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I just want to shout out Extermination Force again and say, if you haven't played the game and you don't know what it is basically, think Cuphead, but instead of cartoon
Cuphead,
bosses...
but Contra.
Cuphead, but Contra, but Cuphead is Contra.
That is true.
It's basically like platforming, and it's like, what if the bosses in Cuphead, you also had to climb on them?
Yeah, what if they were 10
them?
times their size,
yes,
and it became a lot more about platforming?
Yes, and that's what Extermination Force is. It's like, it's platforming levels that are bosses. I think of the one boss where you are climbing its interior, and its interior has like turrets and stuff, and you're trying to make it to the top, and you got the big hammer, and you got to hit the big red button essentially to kill them. And they've got multiple phases.
Bat, so you've got like a melee attack and a long range attack. It's really nice.
And there are like 16 of them or something. There's a lot of bosses.
Yeah, it's like a 4 or 5 hour game. It's solid.
Ramps up really nicely. Some really creative ideas in there. I like it a lot. I think more people should play it.
Definitely.
From
everything we've discussed,
yes,
I think either Untitled Goose Game or Ape Out could probably go at 7. I just don't know which one.
How do you feel? I know you like Ape Out more. I've also played Ape Out, and I haven't played Untitled Goose Game.
Tell me what you think about Ape Out then, because
so Ape Out's really cool. I like it in premise. I don't know if it nails it in practice, just because there are levels where I just walked along the side and got to the end and didn't encounter anybody and didn't have any combat and just walked to the end. And obviously that
mechanically at points it's not always the strongest. It's a lot more about its style, its music, its
totally, yes.
themes,
it is that, and it is like, oh shit, I need to throw this guy into this other guy, he explodes, and sometimes it can get a little bit iffy in terms of the art design of knowing what type of enemy you're fighting.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like kind of blending in terms of like knowing the backpack guys with the explodey backs, and then you throw it into a wall and you kill yourself at the same time. There's also like moments of like frustration on the docks, like that area where I didn't realize I could bust through the outside of some of those cabin or some of those crates. So that was that made that level really hard for me in a way that it probably shouldn't have been if I'd understood the mechanics a bit better. But ultimately, I think it doesn't wear out its welcome, because it is short enough and it gets in and it gets out and it does its thing and it's bright and bold, but it's not necessarily repetitive, but you are kind of, it doesn't, I don't think, do enough to twist the formula. Like, there are new enemies that you encounter, there are different hazards that come across your way, but maybe I would have liked a bit more, not necessarily variety, but a bit more surprise maybe in some of the things they would do. Maybe if you throw something in there that's very unexpected and it changes the gameplay for a little bit or something like that.
On the container thing, just very quickly, I think the way that they teach you can break out of containers is, I believe that they start the level with you in a container.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I get that. It just maybe I wasn't paying attention to that.
Yeah, because I think there's a big break before you see another container. It's just like, oh, I didn't realize that's a container. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think overall I did probably have a better time with Untitled Goose Game.
Is Ape Out lower than Extermination Force?
For me, no.
Okay,
but if you feel strongly about it, I could maybe be convinced.
I mean, I probably had a better time with Extermination Force. I don't know. I don't know how you feel, but for me, Ape Out is definitely the lower end of this list, and I really like. It does a great thing very, very well. It does one thing and it nails it. Right.
It does one thing. It's very one note.
I mean, so is Extermination Force. Frankly,
yeah.
And so they're very that's kind of what we're getting at the end of this list here is those games.
One note, but a very strong one note.
Yes, 100%. And like if I'm comparing Ape Out to something like Katana Zero is like surprise after surprise, like constantly like wow, redefining what it is, and like should we put it at number 8 for now and just kind of leave it there
for now? Yeah,
and we can maybe feel it out. And then Untitled Goose Game after it. How positive do you feel about Untitled Goose Game?
I really like Untitled Goose Game, but I do think you are more positive about these other games, and I'm going to struggle to get it any higher than the next slot, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah. What was it about Untitled Goose? Because for me, like, I look at that game and I hear Giant Bomb talking about it. I'm like, Bally's not going to have a good time with this game. This sounds like adventure game logic and puzzles that will frustrate you.
So I totally did the thing where I'll struggle for 10-15 minutes. If I don't get it, I'll just have a quick look online. What do I have to do? And that kind of worked in a good way for this game, especially because I had Caroline sitting next to me and it wasn't just me being...
right, you got two heads instead of one. Also, she has like a history of playing old adventure games, so she probably has a good eye for stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, no, and she is really good at like, oh, what if you put that there? And it's like, oh, it worked. So that she's like very good at that kind of lateral thinking when it comes to puzzles like that. So that helped a lot and did make it more fun for us. It's the combination as a purely puzzle game and an environment to explore. Like, I think it's fine. I think where it's really strong is like is the animation of the goose and how cute that is. Like, if you like cute animals doing fun things, like watching a goose waddle around with just this great animation, and you can honk and flap your wings and run with your wings behind your back, like whenever you want, like at a certain level, that is fun. And the way that can interact with all these moving parts works really well. And it's also got a really great victory lap, this game, that I think works really well. And it's very sandboxy. Like it does a number of things really well, even though none of those single things are particularly new or innovative. Like, it's a cute goose doing a puzzle game. But on top of that, it's a really nice art style. It's a really cool representation of a little English town. It's, well, I should say village. And it's just fun, like the hiding in boxes, and being in pubs and like little shopping centers on the like someone's back garden, and it's cool. I like it a lot, and I think I'm happy for it to go number 6. I think it is, it's number 6. But it'll certainly be a little bit higher on my personal list, I think.
So here's the thing: if you put it at number 6, that means Katana Zero is no, that would be number. Oh, that is number 6, I guess.
Yeah,
no, that's number 7. That's number 7. So
sorry,
10, 9, 8, 7.
7. You're right.
7,
sorry,
yes.
number 7. So Katana Zero is. Well, we need to discuss number 6.
Yeah. So these.
So my impression of your views on these games are you like Slay the Spire is top, and then I don't know between Bloodstained and Katana Zero. But...
Well, like, here's the thing, right? Katana Zero on Switch is better than Bloodstained on Switch, but Bloodstained as a game I like more because I played it on PC in the optimal version of that game. So it's a hard one, I think.
I think you could probably argue, like, we can talk about Bloodstained like in its best light. We've used that phrase before.
Sure.
And, like,
yes.
Imagine it is running well, even if it wasn't always on Switch. Not
sure.
That you've played the Switch version. But...
No. And that's why, because the backer thing went out and they were like, hey, do you want to switch to a different version? I was like, nope, I do not have any faith that will be a good version. It's one of my pet peeves with the Switch generally. So I think that's fine, actually. I think Katana Zero can be at number 6 and Bloodstained can be at number 5.
Okay.
I think that works. And just to say a bit about both of them, Katana Zero, what a fantastic game. Like, it has the Hotline Miami thing going for it, which I never got too into, mainly because Hotline Miami is like a top-down game, and like combat in that scenario doesn't excite me that much. Like, it doesn't really work. But this is a side-scroller, and you have a sword, and you cut bullets in half, and you reflect them back at enemies, and the slow-motion stuff just looks incredible. And Katana Zero has some of the best pixel art I have ever seen. It is remarkably good. And in a year with Wargroove, which I also say is incredible, I think Katana Zero maybe edges it out. It is that good. It is actually insane how much attention to detail, all the characters and the ways that they emote and things that they have to do within the story is just, it's crazy. And the amount of time that went into making this game, I can't even imagine. I remember the guy, it's a one-man developer, and I remember him coming on Kind of Funny in like 2015, probably the first year they were doing stuff. So 4 years ago, where they showed it off at a GDC live stream. And then I was like, oh wow, this looks really cool. But to see that it's not just those levels, like the levels are great and they're really fun, and it's a lot of figuring out beating all these enemies without dying, without taking a hit. And that's great, but also there is so much weird story stuff and cutscenes and things that, like, gameplay wise, that really you do not expect. That was what pushed me over the edge on this game, and why I enjoyed it so much. It's a hard game to really talk about why, because a lot of that spoils a lot of the joy of discovery, but I loved it. And I
you said aspects felt a little bit like a more side-on 2D version of like that ape-out mechanic, where it's about that survival.
Right. Well, ape-out is Hotline Miami, but you're an ape, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's about survival. It's about getting from one end to the other and killing everything along the way and surviving. So they are fundamentally kind of, at a base level, very similar. The difference is that ape-out just does that, whereas Katana Zero does that, and then it does more. It does a lot more in terms of changing the gameplay, having crazy boss fights, things like that, doing a lot of weird time manipulation story stuff that is very subversive, and fourth wall breaking. And that's kind of why I elevate it a bit higher.
It's got that kicker story.
Yeah, I don't know. The story, it's weird. I came out of it not necessarily knowing 100% what was going on, and it leaves off in a place where it kind of is a cliffhanger, and it definitely leans into we need to tell more of this story. And I think you would enjoy that aspect of it for sure. Yeah, I like it a lot. That said, Bloodstained is Bloodstained, and it is basically some Symphony of the Night. It's the best Castlevania that has been made since Symphony of the Night. It's fantastic. It's so much fun. The level design, the world, the exploration, the powers, all of it is just, the feel is perfect. It is exactly what I want. It is 100% just a great map. Often I did get lost, but for me, getting lost in a Castlevania is nowhere near as detrimental as getting lost in another type of Metroid game, because you're constantly killing things and leveling up along the way. So the incidental, just going back and forth and backtracking, is always valuable, because either you're collecting shards, which will give you power-ups from enemies, or you're getting XP, which will make you stronger and help you in boss fights. So it gives you that intimacy with the space, and that was the thing, I think, why Symphony of the Night still holds up is its castle is so memorable. Like, the space that you explore, I know it back to front. And Bloodstained is the first time since then that they have made a castle that has had that same feeling for me, and knowing the areas and where you go and everything. It was also a game that I had a lot of fun breaking in terms of finding weapons and things that worked for you, and there was this one in particular that was kind of like, it's like Robin's wind attack in Smash Brothers, where it does these slashes, these wind slashes in front of you, and that was the weapon, and it just shredded people. It just fucking shredded things. I remember going into this boss fight and just like jamming as fucking hard as I could, and the boss died in like 10 seconds, and I tell you, I've never felt so powerful in a game. Like, it was amazing. So for me, Bloodstained is the exceptional game. I adore it, and I have it higher on my list than Fire Emblem. So for me, it's up there. And
you have it higher on your list than Fire Emblem?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Bloodstained is something special for me.
Well, that's just revealed a lot about the next discussion.
Well, not necessarily, because I think...
Well, we'll get there. Shall we dive in? We're on top 4 now.
Sure.
We've got 4 games left. Luigi's Mansion 3, Wargroove, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Slay the Spire. So we're trying to fill that 4th slot. Do you think I should explain where I am on these games, or at least on Fire Emblem?
I think you with Fire Emblem, you're probably not that hot on it.
Well, let me explain. So I think I have a bit of a mixed history with Fire Emblem. Like, Fire Emblem is just not in my top tier. It's very much so in your top tier. I've had a really mixed experience with lots of Fire Emblems over the years. And regardless of how good I think a Fire Emblem game is, I find it personally very hard to get into a mindset to play lots of Fire Emblem. This makes it very hard to beat Fire Emblem games, because Fire Emblem games are very, very long. Like, I find them real brain burners when it comes to looking after my units, the strategy of the thing. Going alone, games like Conquest Awakening had enough mechanics where even going from map to map to map is a lot for me to like digest and take in. And when you're talking about mechanics and things like that, Three Houses just adds another layer. It doesn't. I wouldn't say it like completely multiplies the complexity of Fire Emblem or anything. I really don't think it does that. I think if you know Fire Emblem, like, it's doing a few different things. It's doing a couple of added things, but it's not completely reinventing the wheel. It's just kind of adding a bit of a level that I personally found very hard to get into. And I should say I'm about 20-25 hours in. I'm not at the big story moment, which is a shame. I would have liked to have gotten to that point. But I do just find this game very hard to sit down and play a lot. And I think the story rewards are like very, for me, because I play so slowly, they feel very few and far between. And I'm just talking honestly about my personal preference. I'm not saying whether like this is a good or bad game, and I don't have a final view on that.
Sure.
I think when I eventually beat this game, and I do think I will beat it eventually.
That's what you said about Xenoblade X, motherfucker. Look where we are now.
Totally beat it. I think that even if it has huge story payoffs, I think for me personally, there's such a mechanical uphill, and that's not to do with this game specifically. I think that is generally Fire Emblem, that it will probably not break my personal top 5. I think it would happily sit in my top 10 though. And it probably currently isn't in my top 10, if that makes sense. So like,
right.
And maybe I would have felt better coming in a bit more fresh. I did play Conquest earlier in this year, I played the entirety of that game because I restarted it. So like, maybe I was a bit burned on Fire Emblem. Like, there's a few factors, but it's not my cup of tea. It doesn't gel with me, and the stuff that they added doesn't make this Fire Emblem gel any more with me. But I appreciate the world building. I am enjoying the story moments so far, but as I said, they just feel a bit few and far between for me. And yeah, for me, it's not hitting my top, like hitting all the notes that I like. But that's just my personal preference.
I think Three Houses is interesting because it is the combat, like the strategy is not the height of the series. It's really, that's not the point of this game. This game is way more of an RPG than Fire Emblem has ever been. It is Persona, and it is, in some senses, Stardew. Like, it is like a calendar-based thing where you have tasks to do and you do them. And it's about your students. It's about nurturing your students and getting to know them and doing all that. Here's the thing, right? Support conversations have always existed in Fire Emblem. Back in the GBA days, you would do support conversations. You'd have a limited amount, so you could only get to A rank with one character. You'd have 5 support conversations per playthrough, so you could only A rank with one character, and then you could maximum B rank with a second character. So it was cool, and it was a neat mechanic, and it like added a few bonuses you would get if you stood next to them. And then they expanded it, and they were like, okay, relationships are a thing in Awakening, and like you can have kids and stuff. And at that point, they lifted the restriction, so you could do as many support conversations as you wanted with as many people as possible. Even back then, I was like, yeah, I did quite a few of them because I had lots of characters mixing with each other, blah blah blah. But I didn't have this desire to go after them. The way that they do characterization in Three Houses, the fact that it's all voice acted, remarkable for me.
And I have really been enjoying that. I agree entirely on that point.
Yes, it is. It's such a step up and an elevation of the importance of the story in this game. Because of the voice acting, because of that investment, you care so much more about the characters.
Which is something you've not really cared about much in Fire Emblem games previous, right?
No, like when I talk about my favorite characters, I talk about them on the battlefield in terms of like Nephany fucking shreds it in Path of Radiance, or I don't know, Hector is amazing in the GBA games, right?
Right.
But like as characters, I don't like Nephany's not a character really. She hardly speaks in the entire thing, and like there's no real personality there. Whereas in this game, because you have a small group of students, there's like 8 to 10 students you have, and for the most part, like you can recruit people and you can take from other houses, but your set of students are the ones that you get to know. They're the ones you'll take into battle. They're the ones who you're preparing to build on, and like you are figuring out from the beginning, okay, I want to go down this path, so I want to make sure that these two are always doing horse riding practice. And
I have been liking that. Yeah, totally. For me, it's just more the pacing. Like it doesn't. Yes. I just know for a fact I will be spending a lot more time than you in maps. So as a result, if I'm playing for 4 hours, say, not that I've often done that with Fire Emblem, but like I will have much less of the story compared to you. And I think that for a game where the story and the characters and that voice acting and getting to know those 8 to 10 characters, and I agree, these are the best bits of the game. I've not had enough of that as a proportion of my overall gameplay.
Right. I don't know though, because for me that's the majority of the game. Like I barely think about the map stuff because you do like one battle at the end of the month unless you want to do an extra one like in the weekends in between. Like the vast majority of this game is running around the monastery collecting random doodads and giving people presents and doing tea time and improving skills and having dinner and all this other nonsense. That is the game, really. The game really is just building up your army and turning them from kids to adults. And like the moment when I was doing Black Eagles and I came back after that time jump and you see all your units for the first time, and they all look completely different. They've got new hairstyles, they're wearing new outfits, they all look more mature and older. Like, you feel the time that has happened and has taken place, and it's such a good moment because you're just like surprised at everybody's differences and like how they've grown and how they've changed in the intervening years. And because they do such a good job of building out those support conversations, there are certain support conversations that you can only have post time skip, and they will reference things that you did pre time skip in terms of that support in particular. And I love that about it. I think it's such a smart thing that there's this thread that runs through between the two periods. And by the end of my first playthrough, I had done every support conversation between every single character in my army. That means everyone had A rank with everyone else, which is crazy. I never did that in any other Fire Emblem game. It's the only time I've ever felt compelled to do so, and it's because of the writing, it's because of the characters, it's because it feels like that is the purpose of the game. More so than anything else, support conversations are the video game almost in this entry. Which is really weird for a thing that was such a sideline before.
I have enjoyed, like, during the day I might have played a battle, built up some support conversations. And then before bed, I'll just take my Switch and just go through the well, I don't have to read, they're just spoken to me and just take them in. And I have really enjoyed those aspects, and it's just the overall package wasn't driving me on, and that's totally personal preference. And like, as I've said, like, I do intend to beat this game, or at least get to the big story beat, and then see where I'm at. But yeah, so it's really cool that like you love all those aspects, and I do like those aspects a lot as well. It just doesn't. It's not my personal preference.
I know. Yeah, and I get that. I 100% agree, because
and I think that's more Fire Emblem widely than this as a standalone game, because I think standalone, this game is doing a lot of stuff that I actually prefer to some of the other Fire Emblem games, honestly.
Yeah, it does do a lot of streamlining, right? Like, it definitely...
The streamlining, the characters, the story, like, there's a lot more intrigue there.
Sure. And like... The thing for me is that by the end of the game, it breaks down a little, because like post time skip, I think the problem is that I'm too efficient, because which is not a thing. Just like, okay, fucking a bit up your own ass, but what I mean by that is I was so intent on having my units be this specific class by the end of the game that I had basically sorted that out maybe a chapter into the time skip. So like after that, I have no reason to go around and build up units or relationships or anything, because...
You were just a bit overpowered before the final couple of chapters, is that what you mean?
Well, I was overpowered basically at the start of the time skip in terms of what I wanted to get my characters to be, right? Like just changing their classes and stuff. So the monastery became a bit of a drag because I didn't need to do it. I'd already achieved my aims because I'd chosen the paths and I'd gone down them. And so I do feel like they should have either minimized the monastery stuff in the second half of the game or just completely gotten rid of it, because it feels like the game makes more sense when you're in a war. You don't have like this month period to just do stuff, right? Like war is happening, battles are happening. It should just be map to map to map to map. And I think I would have had this game would be higher up my personal list if it had that structure to it, where the first half is building your students, the second half is using them essentially, and just actually having that final climax. But I understand, because different people will play this differently. This is also a lot of people's first Fire Emblem, and so there'll be loads of people who play this game who get to the end and haven't even got any of the master classes or whatever, right? Not that you need to, because they are actually kind of unnecessary, and a lot of the master classes in this game are fucking garbage. Like Mortal Savant is such a cool idea, like magic and sword, but there is no character in the game that fits that archetype at all, and like you will never have a good time making a character that, or even like Paladin versus Great Knight. My first run through of Black Eagles, I made Ferdinand a Great Knight because it was a masterclass, and I'm like, well, that must be good. Yeah. And he ended up being really bad as a result. And my second playthrough, I was like, okay, he's going to be a Paladin now. And he fucking crushed it as a Paladin, destroyed people. Whereas Paladin's advanced and Great Knight is master, like you think that would be what it means, is like one is better than the other, but no, it's more situational than that.
But it's just how the stats are distributed, right? And the weapons you can use, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really, I don't think the game explains that well enough, and I think new players will get tripped up by it.
And like the menus you have to go through to view the different classes and how to upgrade can be a bit fiddly, but
there is a lot of convoluted stuff
for
going
such
on,
a complicated system. It does handle it by and large quite well, I think.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does as good a job as you can. I think there are definitely weirdness things going on in there in terms of what you can access when, but ultimately, like it's a game that is about nurture, right? It's about building your army and tailoring and really customizing. And if you're not into that part of it, I don't think it lands as hard. If you don't invest in the characters and like take the time with them, I think that's the hard thing about even doing a spoiler cast with you is like you probably have forgotten anything that's happened in this game, or like who the characters are and what they've done, right? So
I'm sure it'll come back to me quite quickly when I get back to it.
We'll see.
So are you wanting to put it at number 4, or do you want to discuss the other 3 games first, and then we'll have a more wider discussion on these 4 games?
So I just need a discussion on the table, because Bloodstained for me, okay.
You're wanting to slide this in below Bloodstained, is that what you're about to say?
I'm just going to say this out loud. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is my game of the year.
Oh my god, okay.
But the thing is that on Switch, it's not my game of the year, right? Like, I can't, in good conscience, do that. So if we are making the decision of this is in its best possible light, Bloodstained is higher up this list for me, personally.
I think I'm happy to define Bloodstained as the way you played it, and the fact it's on Switch means it's on Switch. Like, I don't think we need to dock it for all that, to be honest. So
it's just weird because this is the Nintendo game of the year. That's my only weirdness with it, right?
I think that's fine. Like, I think I'm happy if we can have a wider discussion about the other games, or just now we can slide in Fire Emblem Three Houses at what number? 6? 5?
I think it's 5.
Sorry, wait, let me get these numbers right, because it's not number 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Yeah.
So, you want to slide in Fire Emblem Three Houses at number 5 right now. And then we can discuss the other 3 and included with Bloodstained, which we already talked about a lot. So you're happy with Fire Emblem? Because, I mean, I'm very all over the place with Fire Emblem. Hopefully we'll get to play more of that game, and it's more a personal thing I have with Fire Emblem than it is that game in particular.
Yes,
and I
totally.
hope I articulated that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay, that is shocking. So I did think Fire Emblem was going to be higher for you, but that's
Fire Emblem's high on my list, but it's
I'll make a gap there because we've not defined where Bloodstained is. So we've now got 4 games in the top 4, more or less. Luigi's Mansion 3, Wargroove, Slay the Spire, and Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Shall we talk about the games we've not talked about yet, and then try and do a general discussion?
Yeah. Where do you want to start? Wargroove?
To go Wargroove, right? You've gone long on Fire Emblem, so I'll go long on Wargroove. Wargroove is the game I have wanted for so long that it's got this. When it was first announced, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. I'm so glad like Advance Wars is coming back, and I was excited. It wasn't my most hyped game of the year. I thought that in order to build on what I already enjoyed about Advance Wars, it would have to maybe have a slightly stronger story, stronger characters, stronger world building, and mechanically maybe do something a bit more different than what Advance Wars does purely. Like, I didn't just want a replicated game as much as I would have probably still played it and liked it a lot. But I think this game does go the extra mile rather than just replicating Advance Wars. And what I mean by that is that mechanically, the critical hit system is incredibly important in maps. And so for those who don't know, every single type of unit now has an ability to crit. So crit means I think they do 1.5 or almost double the damage or something. It's like a big extra boost to your attacks. So, for example, pikemen, they will critical hit when they're standing next to another pikeman. The dragons, which are like bombers, they will critical hit units that are sat on paths. The witches who like attack from the sky, they will critical hit when they're attacking when they're over a mountain. The dogs, for example, they'll critical hit when another dog is adjacent to the unit you're attacking. Like every unit has this added benefit. So mechanically, it's already doing something beyond what Advance Wars was doing. As much as I do think all the other units, I think you can almost match 1-to-1 with most of the units like in Advance Wars 1 and 2. And that works fine. Rather than the cities, you've got these towns and battlements that you have to stand beside, and you essentially like suck the life force out of the town. So in a way, I think they make a lot less impact. They help you a lot less than Advance Wars. Advance Wars, if you stick a unit on a city, they will automatically heal up at the start of a turn, like I think 1 or 2 health points, and on top of that they'll automatically be replenished. So a typical tactic I always used to do was stick a rocket launcher on a city, and you never had to worry about that unit running out of rockets. You just sat there and rocketed away. This game, you don't have ammo as such, but you do have to be a lot more tactical about, because I traditionally always would send my guys into the front line, they'd get hurt, I'd always retreat them, and then this way you're not losing units, so you're getting a better ranking, but also it's more cost efficient to not let units die. So in this game, it's a lot harder to heal up units. You have to be a lot more strategic about who you put into the firing line and who you bring back. And I've not even mentioned sort of like the characters and the art style. The characters are really cool. Like the story is nothing to write home about. I'll definitely say that. But like the Cherrystone Kingdom and like Falheim Legion, like these names, these characters like Mercia, Emmerich, and Caesar, who's just like a fighting dog. Like these are great. They're all really cool characters. Like they just work really well, and they really remind you of the characters from Advance Wars, but just in like a completely different setting. And I think the setting is kind of the bit that maybe surprised me the most. The fantasy design of these sprites is like some of the best sprite design I think I've ever seen. And I did not skip a single like battle animation because I just loved all the animations so much. It's so satisfying to watch them all. And something it does way better than Advance Wars is that between the armies, so between Cherrystone, between Falheim, Heaven Song, and like the green guys, the Florin tribes, I think they're called, they rather than just changing the color of the units, they just redesign the units entirely. Where the Falheim Legion, they really are like the army of like the undead and vampires and that sort of thing. And they will thematically have like an undead dragon flying in the sky. The Heaven Song Empire, the yellow guys, they're like got a lot of mechanical units. Their dragon is like a full-on mechanical dragon in the sky. And like it goes on, that every unit is crafted and made to look specifically thematic to that faction. So it's all these areas that combined it. When this game came out, it really drove me on. I mean, I talked about how I do struggle with Fire Emblem to sit down and play for like 3-4 hours, long periods of time. This game, I absolutely sailed through that main campaign, and it's a pity I've just not had time this year to go back and play a lot of the side missions, because there's a number of side missions I didn't get to, and there's even side modes in this game, like full online multiplayer that I've not really tried yet.
Also, like maps made by people, like the entirety of the Lin campaign of Fire Emblem that's in there. It's
insane. And on top of that, there's like these really cool strategic, I've forgotten the name of the mode, but it's basically like you have 3 turns to take out their champion, and it's like, right, and you can't make a single wrong move. And it's almost like it feels a lot more like a chess game, like these little scenarios where you just have these units. It's like, right, got 4 turns, go, 3 turns, go, or even sometimes like 2 turns. And it's all this added stuff that is just way beyond what Advance Wars ever went for, that I think this game just absolutely hit it out of the park in terms of my expectations for what I wanted and where it is now. And Caroline's actually playing this game through at the moment, and she's loving it. And again, that's just reminding me of like how great this game is. And I'll reveal that this is definitely like my game of the year by quite a long way, actually. And I know you've touched on the game, MZ.
Yes, I have. So I've played Wargroove for maybe 3-4 hours total.
Just like the first few missions or so?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know how many in. I am the total opposite, right? Because we talk about this constantly.
Yeah.
Advance Wars fucking exhausts me. It like makes me want to cry because Like, okay, so the last mission I did, because I was like, before the end of the year, maybe a couple of months ago, I was like, let's hop back into Wargroove, see if I can play this thing through before the end of the year, and then I can have a bit more of an informed discussion on it. And the map that I did took me 2 hours, and it felt like the most exhausting thing in the world, because it was my fundamental problem with Advance Wars and with Wargroove is making units who are then disposable, who then you have to make new ones, and there's no choke points, right? Choke points in Fire Emblem, you get a big tank guy, you stick him there, he is a wall, people run at him and he kills them all and they all die. And unless there's reinforcements, there's not going to be respawning enemies or none of that shit. He just stands there, he kills them all, you can have an archer behind him, you can have a mage behind that, you can get them from different angles, you can stop a choke point. In Wargroove, you cannot do that, because units are not leveled. Units don't have higher power than other units unless it's specifically like, this one has an advantage over this one. And so I got to the situation where there's these 2 bridges and I need to get across this river to hit this guy and to take him out or to capture a tower. And you can't just put one unit and get your way through there. You have to have like a strategy to where you're able to break through somehow, and I just don't know how to do that. I fundamentally, because my brain is wired for Fire Emblem in these types of games, I throw people out there and they die, and I'm like, what the fuck do? I have to wait, I have to build new units and wait 2 turns for them to get far across enough the map, because I don't have a spawning place near me, and the enemy has a spawning place right next to them, so they're getting people right there as quick as possible. And one wrong move puts my unit there and they get destroyed by another one. I don't see it coming, and they can run around the corner, and Anyway, long story short, I played that map and I was like, I'm never finishing this game, because it tired me too much. I was done with it.
It does have a difficulty scaler, and I would like to say that's a good benefit of this game.
It is, and if I was to go back to it, I would just drop the difficulty down, because it launched and it didn't have that, and I think that was a lot of people's complaints with it, was that it's brutally difficult, and I feel very similarly about it. It just feels like there's one unit you have which is kind of all powerful, but also even then they're not necessarily the case. It feels like you really do have to take advantage of the crit system, otherwise you're just not going to be good. And if you don't know the matchups in terms of what is good against what else, it's very tricky. And it's not like a weapon triangle where you can go in a circle. So every single one has a different matchup to every single other unit.
That's one thing I noticed when Caroline was playing that they have updated. So when I played the game, they've got this chart that had it was quite unclear, because it just gave you like a tiny little sprite design of like the head of each type of unit and what unit they were good on. They've completely changed that, where it's like a proper fleshed out list that will actually show you the full unit and what they're good on. It's much more clear. So for someone just coming into the game, it makes a lot more sense that, and I was just going to say, like, there are a lot of critics out there, video game critics, who they often just skirt over Advance Wars and Fire Emblem as like being very similar with just different aesthetics.
They are so fucking
and, like,
different.
You only
it's
have
not
to
even
listen
funny.
to this podcast to know how much I struggle with Fire Emblem, how much you struggle with Advance Wars and Wargroove, to know that like strategically they are so different. And you did articulate it really well about the choke points.
On a surface level, you can look at both of these series and be like, they're the same thing. They are so fundamentally different, it is not even funny. Like, and I think that is so well articulated in The Two of Us, where we are on opposite sides of the spectrum. And when you really dig into it, like, it's very clear that one of these is definitely more my thing and one of these is definitely more yours. And I don't know how that nets out. I think it's probably because we both grew up playing the individual series, and therefore we got indoctrinated to them, and therefore our brains were wired in certain ways. And once that has happened, because like they're similar enough for you to think you can play them one way, that's where it breaks down for me. But what I won't take away from Wargroove is it is incredible looking. Like, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Some of the best pixel art I have ever seen. Remarkable animation quality. Really good soundtrack. Like, I was streaming some of this game and forcing myself to listen to it as a result, because when you're streaming, like, I'm not listening to a podcast at the same time. And I was like, oh wow, this is really, really enjoyable. And I also like that there's all these side missions that you do these different things where there is the one where you are in charge of the dog army and you're invading this castle and you have to open rooms to let people out and let them escape. There's more of a story context to a lot of the map design, whereas I think Advance Wars is like, okay, here's another map that is using this tile set, right? This game very much builds a narrative around the maps, which I like a lot, and I think
I love the fantasy setting infinitely more than the cartoonized militaristic kind of thing
totally
goes for. Yeah. And this game is just so good, and so like they put so many modes in that it's just, you could play this game forever. Like, this could be one of, lots of people have like one game that they only play. This could be that game, like between online modes, the campaign, side missions, other side modes. There's a lot here, and I hope they'll make a sequel one day. I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And then there's Slay the Spire. Slay the motherfucking Spire. I have not been this blown away by a game in a long time. It isn't my game of the year because I think for me, as we had this discussion, I think last time, right, about your personal comfort food versus the thing that's fresh and new.
Yeah, and Wargroove does that for me 10 times over. Like, exactly.
Yes. Slay the Spire is my, like, Bayonetta 2 of the year. It's my Overwatch. It's my game that, like, I have no interest in, and then I play it and I'm like, this is one of the best fucking things ever made. If we're talking about, and again, there's no objectivity, but like, this game is close to fucking perfect. It is astonishingly good in the way that it is a roguelike and a card game. Two things I don't care about that much, right? Like, I feel like over the years I've gotten much better at widening my tastes and playing different games. Like, I got into Hearthstone, which is a card game. I played Rogue Legacy, which is a roguelike. I like both of those games a lot. They are not near the quality of Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is just remarkable because it takes these ideas and it breaks them down, and it says, okay, let's start simple, right? Let's start, and you just have attacking cards and you have defending cards. You have 5 of these cards that do 3 damage, and you have 5 of these cards that defend you for 3. Or 5, whatever it is. 5, I think 5 is the number. And that's what you start with. Let's fight an enemy. The enemy's very simple. It has like 12 health. So if it's going to attack, it shows you what it's going to do. So it's bringing these elements like from Into the Breach, where you know what the enemy's going to do on your turn, so you can prepare for it. So it's like, okay, it's going to attack you for 4 damage this turn. You can play 3 cards in a turn. You can do 1 defense and then hit him twice to do some damage. And that's the simplest aspect. You start off and you start learning that. And then from there, they start adding wrinkles. They're like, okay, so what if this card gets played, and every time you play an attack card, you do 1 extra damage for the entire fight. And you're like, oh, that's fun. And then you find like, oh, here's this card that will give me 3 0-cost attacks in my hand at the start of my turn. And if I play that alongside the card that gives me +1 damage on each hit, I get extra 3 damage every turn for doing all these cards. And then you get another card which is like, if you have this many cards in your hand, you discard them, you get all of these cards at once, 0-cost cards, and every time you hit, you also accumulate a shield. And so you build these strategies that your deck slowly morphs from this very simple basic thing into something way more complicated with a grand overarching strategy. And by the end of the run, you realize you have this entire deck that is built around this idea, but you weren't doing it from the beginning. It's not like other card games where the game says, okay, build the deck and then play with it and then figure it out. Because it is so incremental, because you get 1 card at a time and you're constantly making micro decisions about, okay, should I take this one or this one? What works better for the deck I'm trying to build? It is the first time I have felt an understanding of building a deck of cards and how you do that and why it matters and what an overarching strategy can be. And there are twists to it. So you have relics that you can get. Some relics give you an extra mana point each turn, so you can play 4 points instead of 3. Each card has a different cost associated with it. So like, you could get cards that get upgraded. So if it costs 2 and then you upgrade it, now it only costs 1 to play. So it's a more powerful version of that card. And so you're using less resources to do it every time. There are other relics which will be like, okay, every time you fight an elite unit, they will have their health reduced by 25%, which means they're much easier, and you feel less intimidated about fighting the harder fights, because as you go through the map, you can choose which route you go on. Some of them will be question marks, which will give you relics or benefits or take things away from you. Some of them will be boss fights like elites. Some of them will be regular enemies. Some of them will be shops. Some of them will be treasure chests. And so you choose your path through, and as you go, you start to realize, like, you when I first started playing the game, I was just playing it and like trying to go the easiest path possible, just going for the regular enemies, trying to get all the treasure chests. And I slowly realized that, like, no, if you want to do well, you have to take those risks. You have to go after the harder enemies to get the good stuff. Because if you beat them, you get a relic every time you beat them. And relics are so important because you can have as many as you want and they stay there for the rest of the game. So you just build up this list of relics with all these bonuses. And by the end, you can have a character who, like, at the start of the turn has 3 thorns on them. So whenever an enemy hits you, they take 3 damage. Has 5 defense every time you start, has 4 mana, has all these different things that will accumulate to, by the time you get to the final boss fight, a moment where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm ready now, like I can take this on. And there are these micro decisions being made of, like, do I heal when I go to a fireplace, or do I upgrade a card? That's a decision you have to make. There are 3 different characters. They all have 3 different move sets because they're the 3 different decks of cards, and you play them completely differently. I've beaten the game with 2 of them, so there's only 1 more that I need to beat it with. And even after that, there's a thing called ascension levels, which, like, increases the difficulty slightly as you go up. So it really is the endless gobstopper, and it is effortless in its mastery over systems, its ability to synergize. And Mark Brown did an excellent video on this game earlier in the year, and it's kind of what got it on my radar in the first place. But it is kind of like competitive Pokemon in the way that you build strategies and synergies together and how things intertwine. And that's a thing that I love, synergies, right? Like, fundamentally, it's such a cool idea. And Slay the Spire makes it accessible in a way that I haven't seen before.
I really like the idea that, and like, my card game experience isn't that vast. Like, I did play a lot of the Pokemon trading card game when I was younger, and I find with games like that, often there's a tendency to, and I guess I did this a bit with SteamWorld Quest, where you got your deck, you got the deck you like, and then you kind of just try and stick with that deck to beat the whole game. And I love the idea of this game, where the fact it is a roguelike, it forces you to, like, start again. You have to rebuild a new deck, right? And, like,
yes, 100%.
I love the idea, because that is the one thing that in card games you can get too cozy in your own deck and just kind of try to use that the whole time, and being forced to completely redo it.
Totally. And it kind of gets boring almost, you know, you just do the same thing again. And that was the end of SteamWorld Quest for me, where I was like, I found a thing that worked and I just used it for the rest of the game.
It's like, this is probably the game on this list I've not played that I want to play the most, actually.
I think you would love this fucking game.
It sounds great.
So good. And that idea that you are able to, every time, because it's random what cards you'll get, you don't really know what strategy you're going to have to begin with. And I have never come out of a game with the same thing twice. Like, you will always have something whether it might have the same overarching idea, but the way you arrive at it will be totally different. And what you chain together and what will work together. So for me, Slay the Spire is just, like, it's fucking incredible, and it should be high on this list. I don't know where.
It's already high.
It is already high.
Why don't we discuss Luigi's Mansion 3, and then we can get to the nitty-gritty of an order?
Sure. I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is our podcast game of the year. I think it's the game we can both agree on together, both passionate about, both think is really good, is the height of the series, has so many wonderful moments, surprises, delights, is polished to a sheen. It might not be my personal game of the year. It might not be your personal game of the year, but I think it's the podcast game of the year.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's that thing where when it was announced, it was like, oh, that's really cool. They're making another Luigi's Mansion 3, but, like, our expectations weren't as high as they could be for, like, a Nintendo game, you know? And I think that the feeling it gives you is it's like the freshness and the fact it is, like, about 12 hours long. Large parts of it and how fresh it feels does feel a little bit like Mario Odyssey, like in how creative and just
totally, I agree, yeah,
interesting some of those floors are, and that's really surprised me this year. Like, it was so so charming to just go through that game. And like it has a couple of flaws, but in comparison to the other two games in the series, I think the flaws are tiny in comparison.
Oh, they're minimal, really, yeah.
And having played Luigi's Mansion 1 as part of our backlog club earlier in the year, like I think we just both had a really good context of like what that game was and what it was going for, and then how different it was to this game and how far the series has come. And I think like for next level games to have gone from Luigi's Mansion 2 to this game does feel like a crazy step up. Like it really does.
Yeah, because they're not only like doing a lot of new and unique things, but they are going from the 3DS to the Switch, which is a monumental leap in terms of fidelity and assets and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
it's really huge, and I love Next Level. They do remarkable stuff, and they have really outdone themselves with Luigi's Mansion 3. It is, for me, their best game.
It really is one of my favorite games on Switch, and before it came out, I assumed it was not going to come anywhere near the top 10 sort of thing, and that's just of existing games on Switch that are already out, and I've already played about 45 or so according to Backloggery, so like, yeah, it's easily up there as my top Switch games, which is awesome because it's just so much better than I thought it was going to be. And, like, doesn't it have, like, a better Metacritic than Death Stranding and stuff?
I think it does, yeah.
It's got a really good Metacritic. I'm not saying that's a good way to judge games. And personally, I think we rate it even higher than that Metacritic in many ways.
Like, look at our top 10, and, like, none of these games got the love that they probably deserved at the Game Awards, right?
Totally.
Because like, the Game Awards is, like, Sekiro and Control and all these games, and people feel iffy about those games to some degree, you know?
Yeah.
But these aren't... It's one of the frustrating things about, like, handheld games in the past is, like, those types of awards never recognize handheld games as real things. Which endlessly frustrated me.
Call of Duty Mobile wins the mobile game.
What a fucking joke. What a fucking joke that Call of Duty Mobile... I don't even want to talk about it. It just makes me want to be sick.
Don't want to give them more limelight.
No.
I totally agree. It should be top of this list. Shall we have a discussion about 2, 3, and 4 then?
Yeah.
Shall I say how I feel?
I know how you feel.
I really feel that Wargroove is almost a bit like it finally happened, it finally came, and like a lot of the sentiment I remember you having about Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, for example, like that game came and you were like, well, it's got to be top of the list. It's just so good. And I hadn't even played it at that stage. And I was like, well, I'm not going to fight that with Star Fox Zero, so I guess you get top game of the year. But
to be fair, like, Star Fox Zero is not Slay the Spire, you know, right?
It is not Slay the Spire. And it is a shame I've not played Slay the Spire, because I do think I will really like it. But I can't woulda, shoulda, coulda put Slay the Spire above Wargroove.
No, I know.
So I would really love Wargroove to get in at number 2, and I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is such a great pick as like a joint pick that I don't think Wargroove should be number 1, but like 2 is good. And then between Slay the Spire and Bloodstained, obviously you've said Bloodstained is your game of the year, and that should probably be above it. And then I've not played either of these games, but the one...
See, I disagree because I think that the game of those two that you would like the most is Slay the Spire, which is why I think as a joint list, Slay the Spire should be higher than Bloodstained.
That's fair. That's the game I want to get to next. So as a top 3, it's a game the game we both loved, and then followed by a game I loved, and then followed by a game I really want to get to. So
and a game that I loved. So yeah.
And a game that you loved, followed by another game that you loved, and then we're into the rest of the list.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, there wasn't.
Is that it?
There wasn't much arguing that.
No, I don't think so. Okay, here's the thing. Like Wargroove for me, I don't actually like playing that game that much.
Yes.
Which is weird to have that number 2 game, but I do have to understand it in the context of like you have been starving in a desert, right? Like you're looking for this fucking mirage, and you come across like images of like the haziness of like is Advance Wars, and then intelligence systems are like, we made $90 billion off Fire Emblem Heroes this month, and you're like, oh dear, this is never going to happen, is it? And so to see that game not only come out, but
become an indie darling, you know, like it was so interesting. Like Fire Emblem's gone down the almost semi AAA route. Like it's a game that they've really invested in, gone for, and especially AAA with 3 Houses when you're talking about the voice acting, the cinematics, that sort of thing. And then Wargroove has obviously not had, Advance Wars never had the sequel, the AAA treatment, whatever you want to call it. And as a result, what's happened? An indie darling has come along and stolen that spotlight. And I just think they've done such a fantastic job.
And
Chucklefish Games, great games that they put together. It's in publish, I should say.
Yeah, they made this one, but they
made this one, but they published lots of others. That's right.
Yeah, I think this is it. I think that probably does the job. Slay the Spire, please, people, play it. Fucking Christ.
It's your surprise of the year, Slay the Spire.
It was 100%, like, so out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere. People had been talking about it, but, like, you know, when you just hear about things and you're like, it's not for me. You know, like, and I think we do that often, where we just dismiss things because they're not the type of thing we would enjoy. And I think that from the last few years of doing the podcast, from even before that when I started playing different games, it is so important to go outside your comfort zone. It is so important because you will find something that you love that you had no idea you would.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One more thing. We probably could swap 8 out and Extermination Force. I've had to think about it.
Have you had to think about it? How do you feel about it?
I think between them, I don't feel overly strongly, and I think you definitely prefer Extermination Force considerably more than 8 out. And it also just gives us a chance to shout more about Extermination Force, which everyone should be playing.
So
yeah. We'll swap those around.
Sure, I agree with that. That sounds good to me. I like that. It's a good addition, late game addition.
And whatever the critics might say, 2019, I think we've put together our best list yet.
It's a fucking great list.
In some ways.
In some ways, yeah. Like, look, there's no Breath of the Wild on this list.
No Breath of the Wild.
But like, that's a once in a decade achievement, right? You know, you don't get that too often. But yeah, I think, again, I'm very interested to see your top 10 versus my top 10, because they're certainly different from this list, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, totally.
And this was the year where everyone's going to have a different top 10.
Shall we run through the top 10?
Yeah. Do you want to run down from 10 to 1?
Number 10 is Blazing Chrome. Number 9 is Ape-Out. Number 7 is Extermination Force. Number 6 is Untitled Goose Game.
You've messed up the numbers. You went from 10 to 9, 10 to
This is what I get for not writing them down.
I know.
Number 10 is Blazing Chrome. Number 9 is Ape-Out. Number 8 is Extermination Force. Number 7 is Untitled Goose Game. Number 6 is Katana Zero. Number 5 is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Number 4 is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Number 3 is Slay the Spire. Number 2 is Wargroove. And number 1 is Luigi's Mansion 3.
Good stuff. Yeah, I don't think we had to argue that much, really.
Yeah.
I think it was just a case of talking it out and figuring where we lay.
I thought you were going to... I knew you loved Slay the Spire. I knew you loved Bloodstained. I thought Fire Emblem was going to be higher than both. And I thought that a really good compromise was going to be like Fire Emblem and Wargroove are 2 and 3, but we agree that Luigi's Mansion is a good coming together number 1.
Yeah, I
did predict that.
For me, fundamentally, you just didn't get into Three Houses. And for me, it's not actually my number 1 either. So it is a game that I enjoy remarkably. It's also a game that I see flaws in and I think could be better. And it's a great concept that they can improve on for sure. But like, there are elements of Fire Emblem Three Houses that have never been better in a Fire Emblem game. Like, narrative, it is the only time I have truly cared about a story in a Fire Emblem game. And like, I've liked stories in Fire Emblem games before. Sacred Stones has a good story. Echoes has a good story. This is the only time I have actually been invested in a Fire Emblem story. And that is honestly remarkable. Like, because Nintendo Intelligent Systems, they're not good at narrative. They just aren't. They don't favor it. And I think for the first time, by doing so, by caring about it, by really investing in the characters, they made me care. And so that's the thing that stands head and shoulders above the rest for Fire Emblem. So there you go.
That's Canadian games back-to-back years number 1.
Oh my goodness! Look at that.
Luigi's Mansion and Celeste, both
Crushing
Canadian developers.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's our biases coming in here. We fucking love Canada. In the UK, shout out to Canada. It's pretty similar to here, I guess, in some ways. So cool. That's our game of the year. That's our game of the year list. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this and have found some games you should play. download Extermination.
And if you were just
probably on sale in the eShop sale right now, I don't know. It probably is. Who knows?
If you were just here for a big old fight, I'm sorry to disappoint.
Yeah, well, you know.
There's more years to come.
You know, I think that Octopath Traveler had its day. You know, I think not only last year's Game of the Year, but in our top 50. I think you've had enough of me shouting at Bally about that game being bad.
Yeah.
But
hey, we've got Bravely Default 2, which I'm hoping is going to take some aspects from that game. Who knows?
Totally. I'm excited to play Bravely Default 2.
Let's have a look at that game, see what they do.
For sure. Cool. And also, I think it helped that I had actually played Wargroove. Like, it gave me the respect for it that otherwise I probably would have been like, Bally, you're stupid. And I think that is important. I do think hey, look, at the end of the day, Nintendo did a good job in 2019, but shout out to Microsoft for Game Pass, the true game of the year 2019.
Yes.
Because otherwise I would not have played Wargroove and I would not have played Ape Out. Or Blazing, neither of us would have played Blazing Chrome.
Slay the Spire, or did you play that elsewhere?
No, I got a review code for Slay the Spire, so I'm in the pocket of the developer, obviously, because they gave me a free game. But Slay the Spire is on Game Pass anyway, so I would have got to play it regardless.
Right. So you did play Slay the Spire on Switch or PC?
On PC, I did. On Steam, because they gave me a review code, but it was on a PC review code instead of Switch, which was unfortunate. But
oh well.
The game still plays well on Switch, and I might just buy it again on Switch because it's that fucking good. And it's the kind of game that I would rather play on Switch because it's so easy to dip in and out of.
Yeah.
And also, like, just doing a run in that game is like an hour. It doesn't take long, so it's so easy to just be like, do an hour Slay the Spire and be done, and then come back and do another run. It's, oh man, fuck, Bally, play that game next year. Oh my god.
Do you want to reveal the little idea we had?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So I'll say it then. So MZ had an idea that for 2020, we give each other the power, and it's a very special power. This power to ask the other person, and they have to do it, is to play a game of their choosing.
Yes.
So I think we're going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know which game, because I think you're going to play Slay the Spire anyway, so I've got to be very selective in forcing you to play a game.
Well, we both got to both be tactical, I think. Yeah. But
should we announce it on next week's show for the first?
Yeah, we can announce it next time. We could maybe even do an addendum to suggest that, like, we can have some power over when they play it, because as much as I might have a long list of games I'm going to play, I could prioritize this game perhaps,
Sure. I think it would be fun to be like, hey, this is the thing you should have played years ago, why have you not done it yet? I force you to play it, basically.
So yeah, because we're always trying to beg each other to play games we've played that they've not tried yet, and it's like it is difficult to always get around to them, so I think it'd be good. It'd be a fun time.
Yeah, and we can make it tradition every year. Make sure that the other person plays one game of your choice.
We should always target the first gap in the release cycle of games, I guess, or something.
Yes.
We need to just look at January, February, March next year and decide.
And also, I don't think we should make it a commitment, right? Like, if you aren't enjoying it, drop it if you want to.
Yeah, but it's at least committing to trying it,
Yes, 100%. Cool. Well, I think that wraps us up for this podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you like listening to lists, then boy howdy do I have a list for you coming on December 25th, Christmas Day, my personal top 100 video games of all time, which won't include any of these because I didn't include 2019 games when I was making that list. So yeah, it won't have stuff on it that I talked about passionately here, but that's cool because you can find some other games that I enjoy generally across the board forever and all time. And then we also will have our Mandalorian spoiler cast to round out the triple Star Wars podcast, 3 of them that we're going to have in December.
That's on December 30th.
Yes, that will be the Monday after it comes out, which is Friday, I think, will be the last episode.
And we should say, do catch up on our other December episodes if you haven't listened yet. We've got our Game of the Year Part 1. We've got our Nintendo Game of the Year, which is a Patreon show, but we talked about our top 5 Nintendo games of the year. We've got our Jedi Fallen Order spoiler cast, and we've also got our Star Wars Episode 9 spoiler cast. So those are all in your podcast feeds.
Absolutely. So, yes, that's probably going to wrap things up. We would like to thank some people for supporting us, our patrons, Bally, of course.
Yes, thank you to our 2 $10 tier patrons. They are Atari Alex and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you for your support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated. The financial commitment you give the show. We massively appreciate it.
Absolutely. Means we can play a bunch of video games to talk about at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Which makes the discussion better. It makes the show better.
So you're part of the reason our list of games is so long, because we played a damn ton of games this year.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Yes, you can find us in lots of different places across the internet, including with a nice little graphic to tell you all those podcasts that you can find, which is on our Twitter feed at TNL Podcast. That is at TNL Podcast. You can find me at Lord NBZ. Where can I find you, Bally?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. And make sure to send in your predictions for 2020. It's heating up to be quite a year, actually. We can talk about that next time. But send in your predictions.
March 2020 makes me want to cry. It is so jam-packed full of things. It's going to be a hell of a year.
Remind me what's coming in March?
We got Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Animal Crossing, Doom Eternal in the space of March. And then we've got Cyberpunk in April. We've got Last of Us in May.
Last of Us 2 is May, right? Okay, yeah. So yeah, send your predictions to ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. We would really appreciate those.
Nintendo have not given us a lot to go on, really. Like, Animal Crossing's the one big thing. I'm sure they have a lot of things they're going to put in a direct next year in January or February.
There's Bayonetta 3 floating around, Breath of the Wild 2 floating around. We presume Metroid Prime 4 is way down the line.
Oh yeah, no way it's coming next year.
Yeah, could be anything.
Could be indeed. So yes, we'll be here continuing to talk about it as we do. Nintendo stuff, video game stuff, all the stuff, and yeah, I think that probably does it. Any other things we need to mention? We're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on TuneIn. If you get an Alexa for Christmas, tell it to play This Nintendo Life. That will give us I don't know, some more SEO. I have no idea.
And give us an iTunes review if you would be so kind.
Or Apple Podcasts. Go on to Apple Podcasts and review us there, or whatever that is.
And even if you hate Apple, it like replicates across all these other podcasting platforms. So it's hugely appreciated if you could.
Yes, that would be very nice of you. That's going to be it, I think. Thanks, Bally, for another year. It's been a good one. 6 years now. It's a thing.
Yeah, 6 years. Started November 2013, and we're now December 2019.
yeah. Well, God, don't skip ahead too far, bloody. We'll get there. So, yeah, we'll keep doing this because it's fun and we like it, and we'll see you guys for another episode next year. Until then, thank you very much for sticking with us, enjoying and listening, and we'll see you in 2020. Bye-bye. The musical interludes used on today's show were The Overture from Halo Reach, copyright Microsoft 2010, and Fighting with All of Our Might from Shovel Knight, copyright Yacht Club 2014. Yeah, I mean, there's just too many games. That's the thing. It's like we're dying out here. I'm literally
quite literally dying, apparently. Naman choking on
keys. Jesus. Oh man, right, let me just do that again. I can't put that in. I don't want, people are gonna die if they hear me do that. It's funny. Jesus, I'll just fucking outtake that shit. What was I saying? I don't know.
I don't know. Just okay. I made a point about the sheer number of games, and you were just they're dying on the number of games.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think I know what's it. We went to a Carol concert last night in London because we were just in town.
Nice.
And we just walked in, and I was like, I'm back in my fucking element, baby. Hark the Herald Angels sing, and I was fucking going for it, like fucking, well, like
Wrecked
belting
your voice ahead of the final podcast
Yeah, I was
of the year.
belting the fucking thing out, and my throat felt like it was buckling under the pressure of me pushing it as far as I could.
Jeez.
That was great though, man. I miss singing like that. That was
me too. And the few times that I do get the chance, I do find myself just really embracing it, and the people around me being like, "Bloody hell, he's singing loud."
I know, I know. Oh, you can hear yourself, and everyone's like, "Jesus." Okay. All right.